The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Crash of 2016. This is page 34. Prior to this, we've set up how conservatives saw the 60s as a time of great social chaos and the rise of Ralph Nader and Rachel Carlson and the whole consumer and environmental movements as threats to profitability and business, and they had to do something about it. So page 34. Lewis F. Powell Jr. was just sitting down to breakfast in his suite at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City when he received a call from the White House. The year was 1971, more than 40 years since the last great crash. The 60s had ended and the Vietnam War had destroyed the Democratic Party, leaving Richard Nixon as President of the United States. And Nixon needed a favor. A thin, ascetic man with wispy hair and fragile features, Lewis Powell had ancestral roots in America's first European settlement, Jamestown, and a lifetime of participation in the law. He deeply loved his Richmond, Virginia home and the law practice he had there, which mostly consisted of defending corporate interests and wealthy Southern white men. He walked comfortably, often in crepe-soled shoes, dressed as a Southern gentleman, and spoke so softly that people sometimes leaned forward to listen. But when he spoke, his words were precise, well-measured, and carefully considered. He was one of the most brilliant jurists of his day, and so it's no surprise that the Nixon White House was considering him for a seat on the Supreme Court, a job he turned down at first. But then when Nixon called him again at the Waldorf Astoria, he reluctantly accepted. As a Supreme Court justice, Lewis Powell was very much the moderate, and his legacy on the high court would reflect his balanced and authentic interpretation of the rule of law in America. However, just a few months before he was nominated by Nixon, Powell had written a memo to his good friend Eugene Sindor, Jr., the director of the United States Chamber of Commerce at the time. And Powell's most indelible mark on our nation was not to be his 15-year tenure as a Supreme Court justice, but instead that memo, which served as a declaration of war, a war by the economic royalists against both democracy and what they saw as an overgrown middle class. It would be a final war, a bella omnium contra omnis, against everything the New Deal and the Great Society had accomplished. It wasn't until September 1972, 10 months after the Senate confirmed Powell, that the public first found out about the Powell memo. The actual document had the word confidential stamped on it, a sign that Powell himself hoped it would never see daylight outside of the rarefied circles of his rich friends. By then, however, it had already found its way to the desks of CEOs all across the nation and was, with millions in corporate and billionaire money, already being turned into real actions, policies, and institutions. During its investigation into Powell as part of the nomination process, the FBI never found the memo, but investigative journalist Jack Anderson did, and he exposed it in a September 28, 1972 column titled, "Powell's Lessons to Business Aired." Anderson wrote, shortly before his appointment to the Supreme Court, Justice Lewis F. Powell Jr. urged business leaders in a confidential memo to use the courts as a social, economic, and political instrument. Pointing out that the memo wasn't discovered until after Powell was confirmed by the Senate, Anderson wrote, senators never got a chance to ask Powell whether he might use his position on the Supreme Court to put his ideas into practice and to influence the court on behalf of business interests. This was an explosive charge being leveled at the nation's rookie Supreme Court justice, a man entrusted with interpreting our nation's laws with absolute impartiality. But Jack Anderson was no stranger to taking on American authority and no stranger to the consequences of his journalism. He'd exposed scandals from the Truman, Eisenhower, Nixon, and later the Reagan administrations. He was a true investigative journalist. In his report on the memo, Anderson wrote, Powell recommended a militant political action program ranging from the courts to the campuses. Powell's memo was both a direct response to Roosevelt's battle cry decades earlier and a response to the tumult of the 1960s. He wrote, quote, no thoughtful person can question that the American economic system is under broad attack, end quote. When Sindor and the Chamber received the Powell memo, corporations were growing tired of their second-class status in America. Even though the previous 40 years had been a time of great growth and strength for the American economy and America's middle-class workers, and a time of sure and steady increases in profits for corporations, CEOs felt something was missing. If they could only find a way to wiggle back into the people's minds who were just beginning to forget the Royalists' previous exploits in the 1920s that had crashed our economy, then they could get their tax cuts back. They could trash the burdensome regulations that were keeping the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat safe. And the banksters among them could inflate another massive economic bubble to make themselves all mind-bogglingly rich. It could, if done right, be a return to the roaring 20s. But how could they do this? How could they convince Americans to take another shot at what was widely considered a dangerous free market ideology and economic framework, and that Americans once knew preceded every great crash and war? But Lewis Powell had an answer, and he reached out to the Chamber of Commerce, the hub of corporate power in America, with a strategy. As Powell wrote, strength lies in organization, in careful long-range planning and implementation, in consistency of action over an indefinite period of years, in the scale of financing available only through joint effort, and in the political power available only through unified action and national organizations. Thus, Powell said, the role of the National Chamber of Commerce is therefore vital. And out of the Powell memo came all these think tanks and judicial programs, college campus programs. He reshaped America, and it led directly to the Buckley versus Vallejo decision.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Wow, a lot it's just like, you know, it's shock and awe, basically. It's every day Donald Trump figures out some way to capture the news cycle, and more often than not, to capture it away from the things that actually we should be paying attention to. I mean, you know, Jeff Sessions, Coretta Scott King, Evelyn Turner, for example. I read her article from USA Today yesterday, or parts of it on the air, and I read Coretta Scott King's letter. Jeff Sessions tried to put Evelyn Turner and her husband in prison for 100 years for helping black people to vote in Alabama. He considered that, quote, voter fraud back in the 80s. When he was the attorney, I don't remember if he was AG or federal attorney, but he was a prosecutor down in Alabama, and you know, this flipped out Coretta Scott King pretty badly, and not to mention, you know, the Turner family. So, you know, Trump doesn't want us talking about that. So what does he do? He tweets something about Ivanka's business. Well, of course, the media is going to chase that. Oh my God, has he violated the ethics rules? Oh, the ethics rules don't apply to the president. But then Kellyanne Conway goes on TV and says something about it. Well, they may apply to her. Who knows? But yeah, on the other hand, who would prosecute the ethics laws? The Justice Department. Who just got put in charge of the Justice Department? Jeff Sessions. So now, I mean, it's getting bizarre. So now Trump is saying Richard Blumenthal, who is a Democratic senator from Connecticut, yesterday had Judge Gorsuch in his office, and you know, I listened to Blumenthal last night, and it sure sounded to me like he was basically prompting Gorsuch to say that he was concerned about Trump's tweets, that he called them, quote, demoralizing to people on the federal bench. And there is a fairly substantial number of people. I mean, this is all over the news media. This is not, you know, Thom Hartmann's conspiracy theory, who are suggesting that Blumenthal basically was saying to Gorsuch,
You know, it would be nice if we could get some Democrats to vote for you. You know, it's we've got to break this filibuster. We've got to pass 60 votes. Exactly. Excuse me. That's the way that Republicans have said it for the last 8 years. Oh, you've got to have 60 votes. Sounds so much nicer than we're going to filibuster you. I don't think the words filibuster ever came out of Mitch McConnell's mouth in the last 8 years, and yet everything was filibustered. And by the way, I don't think that there's ever been a Supreme Court nominee who didn't get at least 60 votes. Or not a nominee, you know, who passed. Obviously, Bork didn't get 60 votes, and Abe Fortas and, you know, others. But although Fortas was being elevated to Chief Justice, it's a whole different story. But in any case, so Blumenthal goes on TV and says, oh, you know, it's Gorsuch thinks that Trump is demoralizing. Trump tweets out this morning, Senator Richard Blumenthal, who never fought in Vietnam when he said for years he had, parentheses, major lie, close parentheses, now misrepresents what Judge Gorsuch told him. This guy can't do anything without attacking somebody. Attack is Trump's major mode. And there's something, you know, really, really seriously wrong with that. I mean, this is bully to the point of pathology. It's like a few days ago. This is the headline from CNBC, an article by Jacob Pramuk. Trump gets laugh when he offers to destroy a Texas state senator's career. During a White House listening session with law enforcement, Rockwell County Sheriff Harold Evanson brought up a state senator who introduced a bill requiring a suspect get convicted before their assets can be seized. Now, do you understand what this is? If the police stop you and you've got a car, right now, if they believe that you've committed a criminal act, they can steal your car. If you got 10 grand in your pocket, they can take your money. And they do, by the way. I mean, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the United States Police Department stealing things from civilians. And literally 90% of it, 9 times out of 10, the civilians never get their stuff back, even when they're not convicted of anything. So the senator in Texas says, shouldn't people be convicted before you steal all their assets? So, and by the way, both Republicans and Democrats agree with this in Texas. So back to this. During a White House listening session with law enforcement, Rockwell County Sheriff Harold Evanson brought up a state senator who introduced a bill requiring the suspects get convicted before their assets can be seized. Trump responded by asking the senator's name. He says, who's that state senator? Do you want to give his name? We'll destroy his career. Yeah. Meanwhile, over at the Department of Homeland Security, you know how they telegraph things and then they come, it's like, you know, George Bush in 2001 was talking about how evil Saddam Hussein was during, you know, on the campaign trail. Well, in 99, I mean, he had told his biographer, Mickey Herskowitz, that he was going to invade Iraq if he became president. He kept his word. Or the guy who was ghostwriting his autobiography had charged to keep. They then, you know, started talking about, oh, we've got to do more surveillance. And then we discover from Ed Snowden that boy, did that go wide and broad and deep. And it's like, you know, you get these little hints that something's up. Well, here's a hint. And I'm curious how you would respond. I mean, I remember back 15, 20 years ago, maybe longer. It might have been during the Reagan administration. I frankly don't remember what year it was. But it used to be that the police could not stop you unless they had probable cause to believe that you had committed a crime. I mean, even the crime of, you know, failing to use your turn signal. But they had to have something. And then they started setting up these roadblocks, theoretically, to check for drunk drivers. But in fact, they were looking at people's registration, their insurance certificate. The majority of the arrests, or the majority of the tickets or whatever that were issued, were for people having expired insurance. And you know, they can take away your car or whatever. I mean, it's pretty amazing. And this went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, yeah, it's fine. Police they can stop you. They don't have to have a reason. So it's like, you know, it starts small and then it gets big. Well, DHS,
An article over at NBC News, the NBCnews.com by Alexander Smith. People who want to visit the United States could be asked to hand over their social media passwords to officials as part of enhanced security checks, the country's top domestic security chief said. Now, initially, he's talking about refugees and visa applicants from these 7 Muslim countries, but, and refugees from anywhere, presumably. He just simply said refugees. And this is exactly what John Kelly, Homeland Security Secretary, former General John Kelly, said. We want to get on their social media with passwords. What do you do? What do you say? If they don't want to cooperate, then you don't come in. And I saw this tweeted this morning, and I saw that Sue, who runs our chat room, and one of our most valued employees or partners or whatever, however Sue would describe herself, friends, and parts of our show, Sue lives in the UK. And she said words to the effect of, if you do that, I'm not coming. What's going to happen? I mean, tourism to the United States. We get millions of tourists every year. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It may well be $1 trillion industry. I think it's the 2nd or 3rd largest industry in the United States. I'm guessing it's over $1 trillion. And what's going to happen if we start saying that to everybody coming in? And then what happens if this echoes down to local police departments? So when you get stopped for not using your turn signal indicator when you change lanes, and the police come up to your car and they say, driver's license, registration, insurance, and cell phone, please. And what's your PIN number? What are you going to do? Serious question. What are you going to do? I have been on this planet long enough to see, and it's not just the United States government. I mean, this is just all over. The corporations do it, governments do it. Everybody, they telegraph what they're doing. It's like a trial balloon. I see this, read 1984, read Brave New World, read It Can't Happen Here. I see this thing coming to a town near you. What are you going to do?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I remember when they started the roadblocks, Louise got caught in one, and she was like, you can't do this to me. You don't have a reason to stop. The guy, sure can, and if you keep talking to me like that, lady, I'm going to give you a ticket. And welcome back. Whew. Amazing, everything that's going on. It's just amazing. Rick in Weston, West Virginia. Hey, Rick, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, we had our first resistance protest this past weekend.
In West Virginia?
Now, bear in mind, Weston's a fairly small town, it's county seat.
Uh-huh.
But we had about 40 people. We assembled in front of the courthouse, and we marched downtown and then went back to the courthouse. We got a few flip-offs, but most people, believe it or not, a lot of people honk their horns in support, because I believe even in West Virginia, people are starting to wake up what is really going on. And you're right, it is really nefarious, and it is worrisome. I'm a history buff, and this is exactly how all totalitarian leaders started out.
Yep.
In this country, you're right, it started with the Powell memo, Nixon's war on drugs, and in the last 45 years, it's just progressed. And we're at the point now, if we don't stop it now, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's like this. His appointment's going through. Well, we all know how Betsy DeVos feels about public education,
right,
which from what I understand is one of the 3 legs of democracy: public education, public vote, and public service. And they're all undermining that on a regular basis.
I agree, Rick. As a West Virginian, if that's the correct usage of the word, I'm curious, not only did Trump carry your state by 30 points, but Bernie carried your state in the primary by 20 points. Do you think that that's because a populist progressive like Bernie could actually carry West Virginia in a general election, and the reason Trump won was because he was running against Hillary Clinton, who was perceived as a DLC centrist as opposed to a progressive? Or
Exactly.
You think so?
Yes, I do. I've talked to many, many people.
So what does
a lot
that
of
say about
people-
Joe Manchin? Because Joe Manchin is probably the most conservative of all the Democrats. He was the only Democrat yesterday to vote for Jeff Sessions.
Right,
And he has said, if I don't get reelected in 2006, c'est la vie. I can go become a lobbyist for millions of dollars a year.
He'll have to wait 5 years now, won't he?
Did he? No, he's up for reelection next year, isn't he? I'm pretty sure he is.
Become a lobbyist.
Yeah, but my question is, if a real progressive ran in the primary against Joe Manchin, and I'm not sure when West Virginia's primary is, but I'm guessing it's this fall.
Right.
If a real progressive ran against Joe Manchin in the primary, do you think that they'd win in West Virginia? And do you think then that they could take the entire state? A Bernie-crat?
I'd give it a 50-50 chance.
Yeah.
Maybe better.
Yeah.
People are just tired, and I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what's really going to turn this state around. If Trump, the only thing I'm aware of that Trump has done for the coal industry is pass a bill letting the coal companies dump waste in our rivers and streams, and even a lot of conservative blue-collar workers are against that. We had all this chemical spill down in Kanawha River about 3-4 years ago, and 300,000 people, and we're only a state of 1.6 million people, roughly, were without drinking water.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
so
and this is a beautiful state if you like this type of scenery.
Oh, it absolutely is. A good friend of mine has a home in West Virginia, out in the rural area. And Louise and I spent a long weekend down there last summer. It was just astonishing. I've been through West Virginia a couple times, and we met with all the local folks. It was incredible. Rick, thanks for the call. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Okay, this is the beginning. There's a whole bunch of other things that I wanted to share with you today. And let's see here. They include Trump yesterday did his first listening session on veterans issues. Now, you would expect that to be a pretty uncontroversial thing, right? Hey, let's get the big veterans groups in here. Let's get a couple of veterans and let's hear what the concerns of veterans are. Right? I mean, this is not rocket science. Well, here's the story from the militarytimes.com. The Military Times. This is an online news. I think that it's in print, too. And, for people serving in our armed forces. By Leo Shane III, dated February 2nd, dateline day before yesterday. White House, I guess it was day before yesterday, 7. White House officials held their first listening session on problems with the Department of Veterans Affairs on Tuesday, but without inviting members of the veterans community to the event. Officials from the American Legion, the Disabled American Veterans, and the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Now, my dad was a member of the American Legion. My grandfather was a member of the Disabled American Veterans and the Veterans of Foreign Wars, VFW. I think my dad was a VFW member, too. Anyhow, officials from the American Legion, DAV, and VFW said they were not invited to the morning meeting and did not know about it until it was announced late Monday night as part of the White House's routine schedule outline. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer released a statement saying the meeting included Tiffany Smiley, the wife of a veteran who was blinded by a roadside bomb in Iraq. That was Donald Trump's VA listening tour. Meanwhile, this is crazy. Okay, are we in a bubble? Are we being set up for a crash? Now, you know my opinion on this, so let me just share with you what Eric Platt wrote yesterday in the Financial Times that I found in this morning's paper as I was reading it. The headline is Investors Pile into Risky Bonds and Bet on Trump Economy. In other words, there's a bubble forming just around the idea
that by cutting taxes on rich people, which Donald Trump has promised will come in 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, and by doing away with regulations, like saying, yeah, coal companies, you can dump more waste and poison in the streams of West Virginia, which they just did. This is policy that was made last week or early this week. I'm pretty sure it was late last week. That by deregulation and taxes, we're going to increase the profitability of corporations. And so the stock market is in anticipation of that going up. Speaking of bubbles. The article, investors are piling into some of the riskiest bonds sold by U.S. companies as they bet on President Donald Trump delivering on his promises of a stronger economy, lower taxes, and less regulation. Well, here's the problem. Lower taxes don't stimulate the economy unless they're on the bottom roughly 50%, which means basically cutting the FICA tax, which President Obama did for 2 years, you'll recall. To get us out of the great crash of 2008. That puts more money in people's pockets and working people's pockets. And working people are the actual job creators because by buying things, they stimulate the economy. It's called aggregate demand in economists speak. But when you cut taxes on the rich, it actually suppresses the economy because they pull money out of the economy and they stick it in Swiss banks. And less regulation doesn't create more jobs. Less regulation causes people to be laid off. If the coal industry, instead of dumping their poison in the streams, which might take one guy with a backhoe, if instead they have to process it appropriately, that takes a factory. That takes 20 guys in a building to dispose of toxic waste. If Koch Industries and ExxonMobil, no longer have to run scrubbers on their refinery plants, or if coal-fired power plants no longer have to run scrubbers, so we're deregulating the amount of poison that goes into our air, so more of our kids get cancer and more of our kids get asthma, and of course the environment and the globe melts down. That doesn't create jobs. You need people to install those scrubbers. You need people to design those scrubbers. You need people to build those scrubbers. You need people to maintain those scrubbers. That builds jobs. Regulations, in almost all cases, actually increase employment. So these guys are making a bet by buying junk bonds on a fantasy that is being sold to them by the Republicans. This is nuts. And speaking of deregulation, this morning, probably the most shocking thing that I've read in a long time. As you know, I am a private pilot, right? So what did Donald Trump say this morning? My pilot, he's talking to airline executives for the big four or big five airlines. He says, my pilot, this is where he gets his advice, his pilot. He's probably a right ringer. My pilot, he's a smart guy and he knows what's going on. He said the government is using the wrong equipment and instituting a massive multi-billion-dollar project using the wrong type of equipment, so let's find out about that. He said, we want to help you realize, he's talking to airline executives, we want to help you realize these goals by rolling back burdensome regulations. And you people are probably regulated as much as anybody. We have a regulatory morass that's a disaster. Yes, let's deregulate the airlines so they don't have to do routine maintenance. Or, it's called routine because it's required by regulation. So, let's become like, an airline from a third world country. Let's have all our airlines be like that. Won't that be wonderful?
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
So I've thrown a lot at you here in this first half hour, but I leave you with this question. What are you going to do when the police stop you and say, what's the PIN number of your phone? Like they're doing with demonstrators right now. This morning, the Senate Democrats spoke up about the Republicans' plans to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And I believe one of the most articulate of the people who spoke was Senator Bernie Sanders. Afterwards, in fact, Chuck Schumer patted him on the back and said, thanks, buddy. And, he's become Chuck Schumer's best friend. But I pointed this out to you. I think it was 2 years ago, maybe just a year ago, when Chuck Schumer gave a speech here in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club.
and he laid out all these progressive principles. It was like Chuck Schumer, you know, the New York Democrat, I almost called him the New York Democrat, who, you know, one of the most powerful men in the Senate, the most powerful Democrat in the Senate, starting not to talk like the classic kind of corporate Democrat, but instead talking like a progressive Democrat, like a FDR Democrat, like an LBJ Democrat. You know, and we played clips from that, and I said, watch this space. Everybody thinks Chuck Schumer is just, you know, go along, get along. He's the center of power in Washington, D.C. He's a fundraising machine for the Democrats in the Senate. That's what he does. That's what he's all about. That is, I mean, and all, you know, some of that perception may be accurate, but Chuck Schumer has been, over the last 2 years, in front of our very eyes, morphing himself into a genuine I believe a genuine progressive. And I think we saw more evidence of that this morning. Anyhow, here's what Bernie said when Chuck Schumer asked him to come up to the mic and speak.
Not a whole lot that I can add to what the previous speakers have said, but let me quote somebody who I suspect I will not often be quoting. On May 7th, 2015, Donald Trump tweeted, quote, "I was the first and only potential GOP candidate to state there will be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid." Now, the point is, Trump didn't just say this in passing. He didn't say it in the middle of the night. He didn't say it in a particular interview. This was a cornerstone of his campaign. He said it over and over and over again. Donald Trump said he will not cut Social Security. He will not cut Medicare. He will not cut Medicaid. Therefore, one of two things are true. Either Donald Trump simply lied to the elderly and the working people of this country and just made campaign promises that he had no intention of ever keeping. That is one reality. Or there is another reality, and that is right now, before Congress wastes an enormous amount of time, Donald Trump has got to come forward, maybe through a tweet, one of his tweets, and say clearly that Donald Trump will veto any legislation that cuts Medicare, that cuts Medicaid, or that cuts Social Security. And if he makes that clear to his Republican colleagues, we can save us all a whole lot of time and start getting to work doing what this country desperately needs to have done.
Good job, Bernie.
Thank you. Absolutely brilliant. And he's absolutely right. I've been saying this for a long, long time. In fact, I remember being on the air during the primaries when Trump said, that over and over again. Last week, we played you 5 different clips of Trump on the campaign stump saying, I will not cut Social Security, Medicaid, or Medicare. Not going to happen. Ain't going to happen. Donald Trump is not going to allow it. And a lot of people voted for him based on that belief. But as we speak, Republicans in Congress are preparing to cut Social Security. They want to raise the eligibility age. They want to change the way the cost of living adjustments, are calculated, and they want to change the tax formula for taxes paid on Social Security, among other things. They're preparing to voucherize Medicare. This is, quite literally the Paul Ryan throwing grandma off the cliff ad from 2011. That ad, by the way, there's a link to it up at hartmannreport.com. But it's the original ad. It's the 2011 ad. I mean, it should be reprised. This is what they're about to do. And of course, anything that has to do with Medicaid, they want to block grant this so that individual states can just cut off people. So Bernie Sanders is right. Either Donald Trump lied cravenly and repeatedly to win the Republican nomination, which I kept saying, hey, this guy's running as a Democrat. Of course people are going to vote for him. They like the Democratic policies. They don't like Republican policies. Either he lied to his base in order to get elected, or he's going to be at war with his own party, in which case they may even try to impeach him, say, over the emoluments clause, and put in Mike Pence, because Mike Pence is enthusiastic about cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And, I mean, he's just a classic Republican. So we'll see. We'll see. It's going to be a real interesting next few weeks here.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and let's pick up your phone calls here. Richard in Lake Villa, Illinois, listening to WCPT. Hey, Richard, what's on your mind?
Tom, you asked about people checking phones before they'd let you in the country. CBC reported today it's already happening.
Seriously, tell me about it.
Seriously, there was a lady and her daughter. They were coming into the U.S. from Quebec. They were grilled for over an hour verbally, and then they were forced to hand over their phones and their PIN numbers, and they spent an hour going through their phones. They saw pictures of their mosque, and they were ultimately denied entrance into the United States. It was something they do all the time to go shopping.
Wow. Because there were pictures of a mosque on their phone?
Right. And she had pictures of her mosque and people praying. And
how did I miss that story? That's incredible.
Yeah,
so
it's on the CBC website right now.
So the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation is reporting on this. That would be
Exactly.
CBC.ca, presumably, right?
Yeah, I read it on my phone on their app. So, it was
Wow.
front page news for them.
I've got to get the CBC app. That sounds interesting. Richard, thank you for that. Thanks for sharing that story. Jerry in Detroit. Hey, Jerry, what's on your mind?
Hello, Tom, and greetings from Motown.
Hey, how are you, Jerry? I used to live there.
Yeah, I heard. I wanted to bring up, unfortunately, our new AG, Jeff Sessions of Alabama, appointed by Donald Trump as an African American in terms of civil rights, in terms of reforming law enforcement and things like that. As a black man, it doesn't really bode well, at least for my people, because I have a feeling that the next time an unarmed black man dies at the hands of a white cop, when it comes to doing anything about the police officer involved or about hate crimes, I doubt, despite any of his assurances, that Jeff Sessions will lift a finger. So I'm not going to even hold my breath on that.
Well, in a way, Jerry, it's even worse than that, because Jeff Sessions' first act was to endorse the president's pick for Solicitor General. And this is an attorney here in Washington, D.C. His name is Charles Cooper. And Charles Pierce is writing over at Esquire.com. Cooper is a close friend of Jeff Sessions, the Alabama lawmaker who Trump has nominated to serve as attorney general, and helped to prepare Sessions for his confirmation hearings. Cooper supported Bob Jones University in its challenge to the constitutionality of an IRS policy denying tax exemptions to religious institutions that discriminate based on race. The Bob Jones University had a ban on interracial dating. As you may recall, this was back in 1986. And this attorney, who is now is going to be our Solicitor General, that's the lawyer who argues things before the Supreme Court, like kind of the main attorney for the United States, who will work directly for Jeff Sessions. This guy argued in 1986 as the head of the Office of Legal Counsel that he signed an OLC opinion that argued that employers could reject job applicants with AIDS if they were afraid of contracting the disease. And he supported Bob Jones University in saying that a ban on interracial dating was just fine, thank you very much. That, by the way, was overturned 8-1 in the Supreme Court. The only vote in favor of discrimination like that was William Rehnquist, the guy who delivered Bush v. Gore to us. In fact, here in this article over at Esquire, it says in 1982, once the Reagan people, and I keep telling everybody this, we're watching the Reagan presidency all over again. I'm skeptical that this is the rise of Hitler, and hopefully not even the rise of Mussolini or Pinochet. I think it's just, But anyhow, in 1982, once the Reagan people were heavily ensconced in their new jobs, the federal government under then AG William French Smith abruptly changed sides and lined up with the discriminatory institutions. The Reagan Justice Department got waxed 8-1 with only Associate Justice William Rehnquist dissenting. And it goes on to say, if the people who celebrated gay marriage don't up their defense, the guys will be coming for them too. They still haven't gotten over Loving versus Virginia. So, you know, it's even worse than you think, Jerry.
Yeah,
but
I think speaking of the Supreme Court, isn't one of the first tasks of the Attorney General is to help the president pick potential Supreme Court nominees? And since Sessions has been confirmed and sworn in, he's definitely going to have the president's ear when it comes to picking those nominees.
Yeah, he will. I'm not sure that that's part of his job description, but he certainly will, Jerry. And this you know, Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions III does not, or Jefferson Beauregard Sessions. Jefferson Beauregard was a famous Civil War general. Does not bode well for the future of, shall we say, equal opportunity under the law at the very least, or equal treatment under the law in the United States. Jerry, thank you for the call. Vera in Seattle. Hey, Vera, what's on your mind today?
I, this morning, is not feeling good, but I have to get on here to tell people, everyone, black and white, by 5 o'clock in the evening when you get off work, you're going to need to go home. This country is going to turn into a police state. As far as your children, they're going to have to go to war. They're going to have to do waterboarding. They're going to have to do anything this president says. And as far as school, you're going to need to start educating your kids at home. You're going to need to get books. You're going to need to get on the internet. You're going to need to rent computers because they're not going to get what they need in the school system for them to survive and know what's going on in the United States. We're going back to the 40s, 50s, and the 60s.
Well, that's definitely the direction they want to take us. And by the way, now that Ajit Pai, the head of the FCC, has said he's going to blow up net neutrality, you may have some problems trying to educate your kids from home, unless you want to educate them exclusively with right-wing stuff. Because once net neutrality is gone, virtually all of these very large corporations that are internet service providers are aligned with Republicans and conservative points of view. In fact, some of them are extremely hard right, like, you know, the family that owns Comcast. And so, you know, with no net neutrality, if you want to access websites that might give your children a well-rounded education, rather than as in Texas in the school books where they said, take out Abraham Lincoln, take out the Emancipation Proclamation, put in Rush Limbaugh. I'm not kidding about this. This happened. You know, it's coming to the internet near you. But Vera, your point is well taken. Thank you for the call. Joe in Bradenton, Florida. Hey, Joe, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I just want to say that I agree with you that Donald Trump, he's doing exactly what Reagan accomplished, and he's like Nixon. And I want to add up to that the president is actually Bannon. He's pulling the strings. Trump, he's a puppet, just like Dick Cheney. He was pulling the strings. He was a president. I know on paper, Bush, the son, was the president, but he was a puppet. And
of whom, in your opinion? Who's puppet?
I mean, we all know that Dick Cheney was pulling the strings. He convinced his administration, and even, I mean, remember when Bush said, "I'm the decider." Well,
yeah, I always viewed Bush as Cheney's puppet, but I always viewed Cheney as the puppet master.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Okay, I misunderstood you.
But talking about DeVos, she said that who needs guns to protect from potential grizzly bears?
Right.
So that means here in Florida, we need schools, we need guns to protect from potential gators and snakes because we have a lot of swamps.
Yeah.
Just like the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, and those god-awful manatees, man, they're going to come and get you, right?
Really. and I want to say that Mr. Sessions, he was the cheerleader. He was the cheerleader of Donald Trump when Donald Trump was saying, we're going to build a wall. Who's going to pay for it? Mexico. He was the cheerleader.
Jeff Sessions was. Yeah, Jeff Sessions was the first senator to endorse Donald Trump, and for a long, long time, the only senator to endorse Donald Trump. And he's being richly rewarded for it. And Jeff Sessions is one of the more bizarre and retrograde members of the United States Senate.
now to be our chief law enforcement officer. The big question in my mind is he going to start prosecuting medical marijuana users?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Jeff Sessions is a big-time drug warrior and a huge opponent of marijuana, medical, recreational, or whatever. So, you know, as soon as he, today, welcome back. Bob in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. Hey, Bob, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Tom, can you hear me okay?
Just fine. Do you ask that because I'm faint in your ear?
Pardon me?
Do you ask that because you're having a hard time hearing me?
A little bit, but I had the phone on speaker and I put it back.
Okay.
To normal.
So what's up, Bob?
Just want to make sure you can hear me. Yeah, I think we don't want to encourage people as democratic people, as progressives. We don't want to encourage people to keep themselves under the thumb of the authority of this state, this authoritarian regime that's taken over the White House. So I think we're well lined up. A lot of veterans support the protesters, water protectors, and this is not just one little spot on the Missouri River. This represents something for the entire nation, and it's largely ignored. We're not connecting the dots with prohibition on cannabis. We're not really making any headway. We're going backwards. So we don't encourage the police to do the bidding of Jeff Sessions or Mr. Trump. And I think it's going to be real big trouble all across the country if we continue in this vein of acquiescence to the authoritarian.
Yeah, like all authoritarians, Trump is trying to diminish the credibility of the press that might challenge him, to diminish the credibility of the courts that might challenge him, and raise both the credibility and the power of police and military agencies who might support him or who might represent a threat to him, particularly the military, if they decide, hey, wait a minute, this guy's going off the rails. I see this both as a preemptive strike and as a massive suck-up. And I completely...
He's off the rails.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Well said, Bob. Thanks a lot for the call. Umberto in Hialeah, Florida. Hey, Umberto, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, listen, I just wanted to say that we have to accept one ugly fact, and that is that the Democratic Party right now simply does not have the legislative numbers to really prevent Donald Trump and his right-wing government from just rolling right over them and doing whatever they want and pushing through whatever extreme agenda they want. I mean, the Democrats can stop them for a while, and that's what they've been trying to do. I mean, they're not going to prevent much of his economic or social or political agenda from passing. So my suggestion is this. It is about time, high time, that the American left, and not just the Democrats, everyone on the left, major party, third party, liberals, progressives, socialists, all the way to the left, we need to adopt a real insurgent attitude. And what I mean is all of these protests that are happening around the country, these massive gatherings and protests, if ultimately they do not have as their ultimate goal to drive this government out of power and utterly defeat Donald Trump and his fascist gang that have taken over, if it's just gathering and protesting for protest's sake, sooner or later they're going to start petering out. I mean, after a while, people are human, and they may start getting tired of just gathering and protesting, but with no ultimate goal of defeating Donald Trump's government.
Yeah, don't forget, 1 million people poured into the streets in 1931 in Berlin in protest of Hitler. Look how that worked out. Umberto, thanks a lot for the call. It's great to hear from you. And thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be back with more right after this. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Pat in Juanita. Am I saying that right? Nebraska?
Juanita, Nebraska.
Great. Hey, Pat, what's up?
Gosh, that last call was kind of disheartening, but I think the press can get Trump. But no, I'm calling mostly, first of all, Trump said he hadn't had one single phone call about the Dakota Access Pipeline, so I Googled the number and I called it, and I got through all the process and got to the comment line, which was the best they had, and it was closed. So
Right.
I guess he doesn't want to hear from me.
Well, that's why he hasn't gotten one call.
Well, there you go. Okay, but what really got me was imagine my surprise when I opened up the mail today and I get a thing from our county clerk, and it's for my husband, and it says the clerk's office, the state notified the clerk's office that you might have moved to blah, blah, blah in Colorado. And so we've got to re-register my husband so if anybody doubts that interstate cross-check is going on, I can prove it. I'm sitting here in the parking lot of the county courthouse, and they said he has to sign this thing and send it back. But they were trying to purge him from the voting rolls because I guess he had some issue 1,000 years ago.
Is he registered as a Democrat?
No, and that's okay.
Or do you have a last name that sounds like a common?
I'm the only one probably the only Democrat in the entire state of Nebraska, and they didn't put me on the list, but they went after him.
Pat, does he have a last name that is a common or could be a common African American, Hispanic, or Asian last name?
I wouldn't say so, but he did have an issue 1,000 years ago. But I mean, why didn't they go after me?
Yeah.
We've been here for 5 years. We haven't moved. We haven't done anything.
That's strange.
I mean, if anybody questions voter cross-check, I have the papers in my hand. Now he has to fill out an important official voter confirmation thing, and who knows if he'll still be purged, because the people here are very nice, but I don't trust Chris Kobach at all.
Yeah, I'm with you. Pat, thanks for the call. Yikes. Rick in Irwin, Tennessee. Hey, Rick, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, you were talking about how deregulation doesn't provide any jobs, and if they cleaned it up, you could have all the guys working the scrubber and stuff like that. But what I think they're doing is they're looking out for the doctors downstream. They know they can get more money out of us if we're sick and have to be hospitalized. The corporations can jack the government up for more money and
oh, you're right. If they deregulate the coal industry and the coal-fired power plants, you're going to have a lot more cancers in the United States, and a cancer diagnosis right now is worth about $500,000 to the medical industry.
Yeah, well, they're going to be jacking the price up because there's going to be more of them.
Yeah. So
it'll be $1 million, and they'll be looking for us. They'll be out canvassing in neighborhoods.
Right, and if they deregulate the airline industry, so we go back to having airplane crashes all the time, all those dead people, their families will start suing, and so there'll be jobs for lawyers. I'm not sure who they're going to sue, though, because probably they also want to pass tort reform, which means that the most you can get is $250,000 on anything, and that's the value of a human life, in quotes, even if you've been disabled by your doctor, screwing you up in such a way that it's going to
leg off or something.
Yeah, right. So that it's going to cost you $1 million to stay alive, but yeah. Rick, an interesting counter argument. Any day now, you can expect Republican congressmen to say, yeah, of course, we're going to create more jobs by doing away with scrubber regulations, by doing away with pollution regulations, because more people are going to get cancer. And, hey, people like Tom Price, well, he's an orthopedic surgeon, but, doctors need more patients, right? And if they have more patients, they can raise their prices and make more money, which Tom Price is all about. And we have not yet even gotten to him yet. He's the guy who Donald Trump wants to put in charge of HEW, or HSS, so that he can privatize Medicare and blow up Medicaid. Anyhow, thanks for the call, Jeff in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hi, how's it going today, Tom?
Great. What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk about. We all know how our federal Republicans are out to come after our Social Security and our Medicare. And I also want to throw in our railroad retirement. But I want to talk about how what I was doing right now. Of course, we have Mr. Branstad as our governor, and now we've elected, it's all Republican, the House and the Senate here. And the Republicans now have an attack on the union for our state laborers. it's called AFSCME, and they're virtually trying to strip the members of the state of Iowa from virtually anything to do with like health care. They can't stand up if somebody's being harassed or anything. They just fire them. The only thing virtually that our state union will be able to fight for is maybe some wage increases.
So they're stripping the power of the unions to stand up for the workers when they're being abused by their employer, even if the employer happens to be the state of Iowa?
That's right. If somebody decides they don't like so-and-so over here, they'll be able to just go ahead and dismiss that person.
Wow.
But another thing that we have is just a bill that's being introduced by a Republican is that a lot of our cities and stuff have raised their minimum wages up from the $7.25, and now a bill is being introduced to strip them back to the $7.25. So if somebody got a raise up to $9.25, say in Des Moines, now that will be stripped back to the $7.25. So right now the state of Iowa is also, the Republican Party is on an attack to virtually destroy the middle class and our seniors and our lower income people.
Yeah. Well, Republicans are all about local control and states' rights when it has to do with things like Virginia shutting down all of their public schools for a year in response to Brown v. Board of Education, so that, you know, there will be no public schools for those black people. They're all about local control and states' rights when it has to do with the ability, the right of a state to discriminate or to cut people off welfare rolls or to, you know, to cut back on Medicaid benefits and things like that. But they're definitely not in favor of local control when local communities institute stronger anti-pollution measures or higher minimum wages, as you point out, Jeff, there in Iowa, or anything that's going to benefit the average working person or poor people. Because, you know, average working people and poor people are not part of the top 10%. They're not part of the top 1%. They're not a priority, definitely for the Republican Party. And this is... it's amazing. Jeff, thank you for the call. Thanks for the heads up on that. Clark in Tacoma, Washington. Hey, Clark, what's on your mind?
Yes, Tom, I want to know what you think about that this president, this sitting president may do what past presidents have done to make themselves look presidential, such as the Maine being blown up in Havana Harbor in Cuba, right. And President Johnson and President Nixon with the Gulf of Tonkin thing, and then 9/11, which a lot of the citizens do believe that this was an inside job from Dick Cheney's black bag. I'm wondering if you think, agree with me, that Donald Trump might do something like that to harm the population of America and make himself look more presidential.
Yeah, the Spanish-American War, I mean, Frederick Remington was, you know, received a letter from William Randolph Hearst, the biggest publisher in America at the time, saying, you know, get me the pictures, I'll give you the war. And they did, and he did, and they did. And that was the Spanish-American War in the 1896, I think. And yeah, the Vietnam was the Gulf of Tonkin, and 9/11. I'm not with you that, you know, it was some kind of inside job. I really think it was what they say it was. But Bush took that and attacked Iraq, which had nothing to do with 9/11 whatsoever. And, you know, and that's continuing to this day. So, yeah, whether it's a phony war or whether it's an actual attack that is used to justify a phony war, it does, functionally, it doesn't matter. And so, yeah, I think Trump's Vietnam is probably coming. We'll be back. Thank you, Clark.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. And welcome to Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, The Fate of the World and What We Can Do About It. And this is from page 165, The Lives of Ancient People. From the San and the Kogi, Value, Community, and Cooperation, we are part of the world, not separate from it. The chapter. One of the oldest cultures on Earth is that of the Kung Bushmen. It's an exclamation mark to make the noise. Of the Kalahari Desert in the northern parts of South Africa. The exclamation point in their name, Kung, represents a sound in their language which we don't have in English. It's a popping noise made in the mouth by forming a vacuum between the tongue and the top of the mouth and then pulling the tongue down quickly. There are three other sounds in their language for which we have no letters, all of them clicks or pops, made by similarly clicking the tongue against the front of the mouth or the sides of the mouth and teeth. They're such a unique culture that although they're ancient, their language contains sounds that have traveled to no other human tongue on Earth. Over the past few decades, as they've become more well-known, they've asked anthropologists and linguists that they be called the San, although most texts from before the 1980s refer to them as the Kung. They and their life are portrayed wonderfully well in the film The Gods Must Be Crazy. The San are racially distinct from the other Africans who have conquered the continent in the past millennia. Their skin is more yellow than black, and their eyes are slightly slanted as if they share a common ancestor with Asians, or perhaps are indeed an early ancestor of the Asians. Their hair is black and curly like other Africans, but they're comparatively short and thin, often standing less than 5 feet tall and weighing fewer than 100 pounds. The lives of the San were first chronicled quite elegantly by Lawrence Vanderpost, a South African explorer and writer. In his 1961 book, The Heart of the Hunter, he tells of coming across a small Kung tribe of about a dozen adults and children as they crossed a particularly hot and barren part of the desert. Vanderpost and his fellow explorers started hunting some game so the Bushmen could have extra food to carry on their journey toward the lightning on the horizon, where the seasonal rains were beginning. The explorers spent an entire day hunting with their Land Rovers and provisioned the Bushmen well for their trip. As the little tribe was leaving, Vanderpost and his group stood to wave goodbye, but the Bushmen simply walked off with many smiles. No thank yous were ever given for all that food. One of Vanderpost's assistants, a hunter who'd never encountered Bushmen before, commented that they seemed ungrateful and uncaring. Ben, one of the other men in the group who understood Bushman culture, responded that to give another human food and water is only good manners and is routine behavior among the Bushmen. If the white men had been starving on a long trek and the Bushmen had found them, they would immediately share their food and water, even if it endangered their own survival, and they would not expect a thank you in response. In fact, in San Bushman culture, to eat in front of another person who is without food is considered an immoral act, every bit as horrific as if in our culture a person were to walk out onto a busy city sidewalk, pull down their pants, and defecate. Everyone would be shocked and horrified. As it happens, the San do say thank you. They do it whenever they're hunting, when they're making a decision to take a life. No animal is killed for food by the San without being thanked by them, both at the time of the hunt and later when a dance is done for the soul of the animal. And animals are only killed when there is a clear need for food. For those of us who grew up in modern civilization, it's difficult to imagine a life and culture where such fundamental things are simply taken for granted. When we stop behind a car at a red light, we don't open the door and run up to the car in front of us to thank them for being so considerate as to follow the basic rules of the road and stop for the red light. It's simply a given that everybody does that. No thanks are required. Thanking people for doing something implies they had a choice to do otherwise and did so out of a desire to be nice. But imagine a world where feeding another person is as much an automatic response as stopping at a red light. A world where a person who fails to feed or care for another is ostracized or punished, the way we give people tickets when they run red lights. Where the care of others is more important than even the care of yourself. Where the teaching all things that you should want others to do to you, do ye even so unto them, is actually practiced. Not out of an effort, but as part of a daily routine, as the normal way things are, as the basic assumption of a society. That is San culture, the way of an older culture. A story of Chippewa, a storyteller of Chippewa and Cree ancestry told me that his people have a belief that if a person visits your home and you fail to share with them food and water so that they leave hungry or thirsty, and then the Creator decides to take them home at that time, they will arrive in the spirit world hungry and thirsty. He said the responsibility for that person's condition in the world is yours because you were the last person he met and you had an opportunity to feed him. So we have an obligation to feed and give water and shelter and whatever else a person may need whenever they come into our village or our home. In our younger culture, we value productivity and individual possession. In their older culture, they value community. Most modern people find it difficult or impossible to imagine a world where community is more important than possessions. Yet this is how about 1% of the world's population still lives, and how all of your and my ancestors lived for hundreds of thousands of years. In 1997, a group of 13 researchers released a study in which they quantified the value of all the environments on the planet, from measuring the size of the Louisiana shrimp harvest to how much people were willing to pay for access to a lake, coral reef, or other natural attraction. They concluded that the planet's natural areas were worth about $33 trillion. And then from there, I go on to talk about how that's a crazy way to value anything. And we need to be, revisiting these ancient culture values. The book is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. For the crash.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I'm very pleased to have in the studio with me here the Executive Director of Americans United. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Americans United for Separation of Church and State, the Reverend Barry W. Lynn. The website is au.org, as in Americans United, and you can tweet him at Barry W. Lynn, L-Y-N-N. Or at Americans United. And Reverend Lynn, welcome to the program.
It's very nice to be back here.
It is an honor and a pleasure to have you always on the program, and the door is always open to you.
Thank you.
So you have a story about Jeff Sessions in your own personal life. You want to share that with us?
I do have a story. Jeff Sessions was not someone that I wanted to see confirmed. In 1999, when he was merely a senator, had been in the Senate 2 years, he decided that we should be considered for prosecution, we being myself and Americans United for Separation of Church and State, for intimidating voters. What kind of voters? Christian voters, because we sent at that time 75,000 letters out in the election cycle, just reminding people that there is a law in the books that says you cannot, if you're any kind of a charity, including a church, you can't endorse or oppose candidates for public office. And then it's suggested, because I'm also an attorney, that if people have a question, they shouldn't just rely on our letter. They should seek their own counsel, but that this was a serious statute. He refers this letter, sends it to Janet Reno. Janet Reno thinks about it for a while and decides that the statute has nothing to do with the free speech of stating to churches what the law is. So she dismissed it and said it was not relevant. Now, unfortunately, Senator Sessions is his own attorney general. He is the attorney general, and I'm curious whether he's planning to consider a reinvestigation of this matter.
And of your organization.
And of our organization. And we have in the past, we've been subpoenaed by congressional committees. We've followed those subpoenas. Nothing has ever come of it. We try to be purer than Caesar's wife, because we do complain when organizations violate the laws. We are kind of an equal employment nudge. We don't just complain about Republican churches that are endorsing candidates. We do the same thing for Democratic churches. One of my favorite stories, one campaign in which Pat Buchanan, a man I used to do radio with, Pat, and then the head of the DNC and the head of the RNC, they all called me to complain about somebody else's illegal campaign practices. And I was able to say in each case, we're aware of it, and we've already sent a letter to the Internal Revenue Service asking them to investigate. You know, we don't have any investigative power, but the IRS does. And unfortunately, because of a highly technical decision about 6 years ago, they've been foreclosed at the IRS from investigating even the most egregious examples of endorsement or opposition statements about candidates.
Well, in fact, my understanding is that some years ago, we talked about it on this program, there was a movement among right-wing churches, mostly the mega churches,
right,
to explicitly endorse candidates from the pulpit and endorse political positions, and then even send the tapes of that to the IRS as a way of saying, in your face, buddy. And whatever happened with that?
Well, the group's the Alliance Defending Freedom. That's what it's called now. It's out in Arizona. Yeah, I know. Well, freedom these days has such a broad meaning, and usually it means just doing whatever right-wingers want to do.
Or corporations.
Or corporations. Or corporate right-wingers.
Right.
No, nothing has come of it because of this bizarre requirement set by a judge to change a single sentence of a tax regulation. They've foreclosed from investigating. Lois Lerner, the late person who investigated these things of all nonprofits and who got in a lot of
she
trouble.
No longer works there. She's still alive.
She is. She was basically fired by this ridiculous investigation of another range of tax-exempt organizations where the Drudge Report and Fox News, why she's delaying giving C4s, the social welfare organizations, tax exemption because she doesn't like them, because she has some kind of intense interest.
This was the allegation.
This was the allegation. Not proven, zero evidence, completely clear, but they ruined her life. Now, I never knew her personally, but she was the person I sent all of these letters of complaints. We filed about 125 complaints over the last 20 years. In the beginning, they used to be taken seriously. A church in upstate New York that took out a $40,000 ad in USA Today telling you not to vote for Bill Clinton and said, send money to the church. Whoa, yes. That was a shocking little thing. I was just coming to Washington at the time. I'd been living in New Hampshire for a couple of years. My wife saw that ad over breakfast, and she said, is this legal? And I looked, and I dropped this, the oatmeal, and I said, no, it's not. So we started something called Project Fair Play. The idea was if you're going to be consistent with the law, then everybody has to do it. Now, there might be some of your listeners who say, well, wait a minute, what about Jesse Jackson? He endorses candidates. Or what about Martin Luther King? Well, John Lewis, Congressman Lewis, told me that, in fact, Martin Luther King never, ever endorsed a candidate from any pulpit, from any religious institution. And he didn't, even though he spoke in those places almost every day of his professional life.
Yeah, even after the Civil Rights Act.
That's correct.
And in fact, the Republicans have tried to claim that he's a Republican, but he actually gave no indication of even a partisan inclination, much less a specific candidate.
No, he wasn't. And then the second one that was former Congressman Floyd Flake, who was a Democrat, African-American, very prominent pastor in New York. And he, for one reason or another, decided to invite Al Gore to a Sunday service and then handed Al Gore a sports jacket, and the sports jacket said President Gore on the back. Mm-hmm. That was not right, so we did complain about that. And the IRS did investigate that. They did have, you have the right in the IRS to just get somebody to sign a letter that says, we did something wrong, we're not going to do it again. And that's what he did. And I've been on radio shows with Floyd Flake a number of times. After that, he says, I know it was wrong. I knew it when I was doing it, but I just did it.
So right now, if churches break this IRS law, all they have to do is issue a written mea culpa?
Oh, no, they don't have to do anything because they can't even be told that they're under investigation than to produce any materials. Why? Because of that one sentence. You know,
What's the sentence?
The sentence is the description of, not the specific name, but the description of the entity who can sign off on these investigations of churches. It's very difficult to do that because of something called the Church Audit Procedures Act. And in the old days, there were different geographical divisions. There'd be the Southwest Division, the Northeast
of the IRS.
Yeah, but then they changed that in the late 90s. And as a consequence, a judge noting this said, you know, you have to clean this up. You have to change the regulation. You have to describe people in a different way because they did away with these geographical determinations. And so 6 years ago that happened. The Obama administration began rulemaking. This is not difficult. You know, rulemaking on environmental issues, you can have a gazillion feet of stuff. But on this, it's one sentence. You know, there's that old story about monkeys. If you put an infinite number of monkeys and an infinite number of typewriters, eventually they'll print out all of the works of Shakespeare. I think you could do this with like 5 monkeys, maybe. A couple of them could be stuffed. One sentence. They'd have not only done that, we'd be halfway through Romeo and Juliet by now. But they didn't do it. They dug their heels in. There was a lot of comments about this on both sides, but the administration of the last president simply didn't act on them. And that's a big problem.
So the consequence of that is that right now, both right-wing and left-wing churches can functionally, even though it's not technically legal, technically, I should extract that word. It's not legal, period.
That's
on
right.
its face.
That's right.
But nonetheless, they can and they do endorse candidates and political positions with impunity.
Yeah, and you know, you can do the political position thing. I mean, one of the things that the right-wingers who want to get rid of this, and Trump seems to want people to believe, is that you can't talk about any issue. You can't say, be pro-choice. You can't say, be anti-abortion. You can't say, but you can say all those things. The only thing you can't do is endorse or oppose a candidate for public office. And when we complain, we don't complain about vague statements. We complain about things that are so over the top. For example, there was a preacher who was telling people for 2 weeks before the election some years ago, if you need a ride to get to the polling place, just come to the church parking lot and we will take you there. And then when you got to the church parking lot on election day, there was a guy in the bus who said, hey, who are you going to vote for? And if you gave the wrong answer, in that case, anybody but the Republican, you didn't get on the bus. Not even. No, I mean these aren't even close to the wire.
I remember in the 2000 and the 2004 elections, right-wing churches passing out voter guides.
Yeah, well, we complained about a lot of voter guides, and the good news is a lot of churches realize that they're so they're just inherently deceptive. And the Christian Coalition voter guides were a total fraud. They would change from congressional district to congressional district based on how bad they could make the Democrat look. And they were distributed by the tens of thousands. And a lot of ministers, and this is the good news, have just said, look, these things are poison. We're not going to distribute them anymore. So it doesn't matter whether they're prosecuted or not. They've already given up that idea.
Right. My wife and I started a community for abused kids in New Hampshire back in '78, and which was a 501c3.
Sure.
In fact, I wrote the application for nonprofit status. I learned a lot about nonprofit law, and my understanding was that it's not just churches, but any 501c3, any nonprofit organization, including schools, programs for abused kids, what you have, fill in the blank. None of them can endorse candidates for political office.
That's correct.
And here you have, and there's a lot of 501c3s that are seemingly benign or whatever. Here you have Trump saying he wants to repeal the Johnson Amendment, which is what basically said if you're running a 501c3, a nonprofit, you cannot campaign or endorse a candidate. If he does away with the Johnson Amendment, does that liberate essentially nonprofits to endorse candidates right across the board, or does it only apply to churches?
That's a good point, because when the Congress got first interested in this, Walter Jones from North Carolina only wanted to free the churches. Later, I think he's reintroduced this bill. He wants it to apply to everyone. Frankly, a lot of us who run nonprofits, we don't want politicians to come and say, hey, I know you're collecting money for abused children, but you think you could give me a campaign contribution because maybe I could help you sometime. We don't want to do that.
Or the other way around. Let me donate $20,000 to your charity.
Of
Hey,
course.
would you like to endorse me?
Exactly. Or how about this? Let's just run like money laundering. Let's say you want to give
the
money.
Koch brothers give money to my charity. My charity then endorses the Republicans.
It's a perfect. Talk about, campaign finance reform, unfortunately, has not gotten us very far. You open the doors for churches and charities to give virtually unlimited amounts of money. You have just blown a gigantic new hole in the wall of serious campaign finance. And unlike your charity and mine, which is also a 501c3, the churches don't have to file any documents with the IRS disclosing where the money comes from, where the money goes, because they're already exempted from that law, as well as hundreds of other laws that affect the other charities that are not religious.
Amazing. There's a bunch of other stuff here I want to do a deep dive on. Stick around.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We're talking to the Reverend Barry W. Lynn, the Executive Director of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. The website is au.org. You can tweet him at Barry W. Lynn, L-Y-N-N. And welcome back. Reverend Lynn is still with us. We've been talking about Jeff Sessions. We've been talking about politics. We've been talking about all these things. What impact does it have as an ordained minister?
Sure.
What impact does it have on a church when those restrictions go away? Because we were just talking about how those restrictions could actually be protections.
Oh, absolutely. Well, when they go away, a couple things happen. First of all, a lot of pastors are already so turned off about candidates and how much they're going to get for them that they don't want this eliminated. I think Politico had a survey of this not too long ago, and something like 80% of members of the clergy in this country do not want to endorse candidates.
80%?
Yeah. And the overwhelming percentage of Americans also agree that there should not be any candidate endorsements. In fact, some people say, well, the church shouldn't even talk about ideas or politics, and I don't agree with that. I mean, I think you want to talk about guns, you want to talk about
If the Catholic Church wants to say ban abortion, that's their right.
Of course,
right?
But the other thing that happens, I think, is illustrated very well by a North Carolina pastor who told people in his church some years ago to vote for Bush, not for John Kerry. Vote for George Bush.
2004.
And 8 members of his church came up to him in December of that, after the election, and said, Pastor, we heard what you said, but we all agreed we ought to tell you we did not vote for George Bush. We voted for John Kerry. Guess what happened to those 8? Thrown out of the church.
Seriously?
Yes, it became such a huge issue. It was in the New York Times and on Fox, and everybody was upset about it. And so they decided to call a meeting of the congregation for January, and the press was really tied to it, desperate to figure out what it was. The congregation did 2 things that night. One, they invited the 8 people back into the community of the church. And then the second vote was to fire the pastor.
Wow.
Yeah. You see, those of us who've actually been, preached in churches, sometimes people get nervous. They don't like it. They get upset by it. But if you start going and telling them who to vote for, they're going to get a lot more upset about it.
Now, you said that 80% of American pastors or religious figures, let's say, I'm assuming that includes rabbis and imams,
Sure.
and are opposed to changing the rules as they are. Given the explosion of mega churches in the Protestant Christian right, does that represent 80% of the total kind of church-going population, or might that be more like 50%? I mean, it's like, how much power do these mega churches actually have?
Well, the mega churches
and the television churches as well.
No, they have a huge amount. And one of the things that would happen if the Johnson Amendment were repealed or eliminated in some other way, possibly by authoritarian fiat of the president, who seems to sometimes think that he has all the power in the world. These mega churches not only do not have to report anything. There was a brief effort by Senator Grassley, Republican from Iowa, to just ask, didn't subpoena, asked for records about the expenditure of these real mega churches, including the one where the guy tried to get a jet for his ministry.
Oh, jeez.
The pushback was unbelievable, and he gave up.
We'll be right back.
This year's election results have generated fear, sadness, and despair.
In the days and months ahead,
our democracy may face a crisis of historic proportions.
But there is good news.
There is good news.
There is good news. Thousands of people are stepping forward in solidarity, resistance,
and resolve.
We join them.
We join them.
We join them.
In standing with the most vulnerable communities among us.
Those most likely to be targeted by new restrictions and policies.
We will tell their stories here.
Here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
We will lift their voices here.
Here on Free Speech TV.
In the difficult times ahead, know that we will be with you 24 hours a day.
Every day.
You are not alone.
You are not alone.
You are not alone. There are millions of us.
Raising our voices and hearts together as one.
We've got your back.
We got your back.
Free Speech TV's got your back.
The revolution is in progress.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. The Reverend Barry W. Lynn, the Executive Director of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, AU.org. And you can tweet him at Barry W. Lynn, Lynn, or at Americans United. And we just have 30 seconds to wrap this segment up. What is the message that you want to leave people with, Reverend?
I think it's important that people not give up. Don't give up the fight to preserve separation of church and state. Join the organizations that care about it, including Americans United. Make sure that you communicate with elected officials. And as we saw just a few days ago, when Betsy DeVos came up, the most unqualified candidate for any cabinet position I've ever seen in the 25 years I've been in Washington. What happened? 2 Republicans joined every Democrat to oppose her, but for Mike Pence coming in, riding in,
right,
she would never have been confirmed.
And that's a demonstration of the power of grassroots power.
Absolutely. There was an enormous amount of opposition to her.
There you go. Reverend Barry W. Lynn. AU.org is the website. You can tweet him at Barry W. Lynn. Thank you, Reverend.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day, your calls, and my thoughts right after this. Been very little discussion of Native Americans. And Native Americans are not only, a minority in North America right now, but they were the original people here. We stole this country from them. We being white Europeans stole this country from Native Americans. And in the process of stealing the country, we slaughtered, we robbed, we raped, we pillaged. The devastation in the name of God and manifest destiny and just plain old theft and greed of
tribe after tribe after tribe across this country. One of the really amazing things to do when you come to Washington, D.C. to visit this beautiful city, the District of the Goddess, is to go to the Native American Museum. And you will get it. This country was fully occupied. Fully occupied. Coast to coast, top to bottom. There wasn't a spot, a habitable spot anyway, where you didn't have Native American communities. Now, they might have had in the more hostile areas, like the desert of Nevada, you had the Shoshone, where your population density was, 100 people per square mile. Whereas in what's now New Orleans, you had, a city, right? The mound builders in the southeast, very fancy, large, sophisticated cities. So we had, there was there's extraordinary diversity in Native American communities across the United States, but they were stable, they were solid, they'd been here for 10 to 23,000 years. And we made every attempt to destroy their culture, to outlaw their languages, to murder them, to poison them, to give them infected blankets with smallpox. We killed off millions of them with influenza and syphilis and diseases that we brought with us from Europe. And now there is a Lakota prophecy that is being fulfilled that is scaring the living bejesus out of Lakota people in South Dakota. And I don't know if you saw this story in The Guardian. I've been reading The Guardian more and more as opposed to other newspapers, because it just does such a great job of both covering American news. They have a very, in fact, more The Guardian's a British-owned newspaper, but more Americans read The Guardian than Brits. It's one of many newspapers in Britain. It's one of the only in the United States, I think, that actually is not somebody's mouthpiece, And they have this extraordinary story at theguardian.com titled, "We Are the Protectors, Not Protesters. Why I'm Fighting the North Dakota Pipeline." And I just wanted to share with you some of this. This is from Iuskan American Horse, is his name. He lives in Cannonball, North Dakota. And here's what he has to say. This is important stuff. Our elders have told us that if the Zuzeska sape, also known as the black snake, comes across our land, our world will end. Zuzeska has come in the form of the Dakota Access Pipeline, and so I must fight it. I am Sikangu Ogallala Lakota, born in Rosebud, South Dakota, and writing from the front line of the movement against the pipeline in Cannonball. I have been holding this ground with my Standing Rock Sioux tribe relatives since the spring. I am defending the land and water of my people as my ancestors did before me. The $3.8 billion pipeline project is proposed to carry approximately 470,000 barrels a day of fracked oil from the Bakken oil fields, 1,172 miles through the country's heartland to Illinois. The pipeline will cross the confluence of the Cannonball and Missouri rivers, where it threatens to contaminate our primary source of drinking water and damage the bordering indigenous burial grounds, historic villages, and Sundance sites that surround the area in all directions. Those sites that were not desecrated when the area was flooded in 1948 by the construction of the Ojai Dam are now in danger again. This week, writes Iuskan American Horse in The Guardian, and I strongly recommend you check this article out. This week, I have witnessed pipeline construction tear its way toward the water of the Missouri River, which flow into the Mississippi, threatening to pollute the aquifer that carries drinking water to 10 million people. I have seen where their machines clawed through the earth that once held my relatives' villages. I have watched law enforcement officials protect the oil industry by dragging away my indigenous brothers and sisters who stood up for our people. The fact that Energy Transfer Partners, the company behind the pipeline, would use the word Dakota, which in our language means friend or ally, in the name of its project is disrespectful. This pipeline is a direct threat to all Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people, especially our future generations. And we are not the only ones. We know that burning this oil is changing our climate, and indigenous people all over the world are bearing the brunt of the catastrophes that it causes. Be plugged in. Sorry for the noise there. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Heather in Phoenix, Arizona, listening on 1480 KPHX. Hey, Heather, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. There's a couple things I wanted to tell you about. First thing, ICE. I wanted to talk about what ICE is doing. Yesterday, I actually found out through an email from our Revolution. They were encouraging people to come out to the local ICE office to try to stop the deportation of a lady. Her name is Guadalupe Garcia de Reyes.
Yeah, in fact, I was planning in my third hour to make that the cornerstone of the hour. So you're
it's crazy because the city of Phoenix is supposed to be voting on whether or not to become a sanctuary city, I believe, on the 15th. And the mayor is in favor of it. He's come out and spoke, and it's just crazy that this seems to be happening with no warning.
Is the mayor a Republican or a Democrat?
Well, I don't know for sure. I would say he's a Democrat. Maricopa County is a Democratic county, so I think so. But that took me off guard because there's where I live in Central Phoenix. I'm basically the minority in Central Phoenix. Majority of the population is Hispanic. So I believe this is going to be happening more and more. People did end up coming out, and I believe 7 protesters were arrested.
Yep.
But I also wanted to, I'll be quick, I also wanted to say that I joined Indivisible Phoenix.
Oh, great.
Yeah, a rally's been organized at the Islamic Community Center on Saturday. It's from 1 to 4, and I just wanted to put that out there. It's a rally to basically stand in solidarity with the Muslim community. Ever since Trump was elected, there's been attacks on different places. And,
so once again, Saturday, what time and where, Heather?
It's Saturday from 1 to 4 at the Islamic Community Center, and that's at 7516 North Black Canyon Highway. It's right off the I-17 freeway.
Okay, great. All right, Heather, thank you so much for the heads up. And as I said, at the top of the next hour, I'll be getting into this story in more detail. Thank you very much. Terrell in Denver. Hey, Terrell, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how's it going, Tom?
Good.
I mean, I haven't been letting these people who on my timeline on Facebook off the hook for voting for Donald Trump, but they have been surprisingly quiet once this guy has been taken office. And I have been not allowing these people to come around my family. And I just let the questions stack up. You can come see me again whenever you can explain this, and this to me. I mean, I am not letting these people off the hook. I'm so sorry. And it seems also that you could do anything unconstitutional within our country to other people up front, and somehow it has to get lawyered back. That's still an attack against those people.
Yeah, it's true. And this is probably something that deserves a more in-depth conversation, Terrell, is what's happening to your relationships right now. I mean, you're talking about people on Facebook. I have a friend who actually voted for Trump. He originally supported Bernie, and ended up voting for Trump. And now his line is, "I don't talk politics." And I think that there's a lot of people who voted for Trump thinking that he's going to change our trade policies, which were crazy. I have said all along, Trump correctly identified the problem. Actually, we all correctly identified it. Actually, in '92, Ross Perot correctly identified the problem. And it's been that way all along, these neoliberal trade policies. And so people thought, oh, I'll vote for Trump and the jobs will come back and America will be wonderful again.
And in fact, that's not what's happening. Carrier gets bribed by Mike Pence using state money to keep 800 workers. And Trump is running around declaring, mission accomplished. And it's just getting weirder and weirder and weirder. And so, at what point do we have to say to our Trump voting friends, even those who are well-intentioned, because there are many who are well-intentioned. They thought that they were voting just on economic issues, not realizing that the whole social and religious agenda of the hard right is now running the White House, and the apocalyptic vision of Steve Bannon driving things. To what extent are we having to say to our those particular friends or relatives, I still love you, I'm still your friend, but I'm not going to discuss politics with you. Or I still love you, I'm still your friend, but I'm not even, you're saying I'm not even going to talk to you because of your politics. I mean, where do you draw the line, Terrell?
Well, I mean, not exactly that. It's just that they have to explain to me what they thought was going to happen, given everything that did happen, and what's happening right now, issue by issue. And when they come to me with an answer to all these things, I'm not going to let you silence your way out of it. I'm not going to talk politics. No, you will tell me what you thought when you did this. And your silence don't mean a damn thing to me right now.
Yeah.
Just trying to stand in my face and sit here and just hide inside your house while this stuff goes to hell in a handbasket. I'm not buying it. You've got to take responsibility for this.
Okay, well, you're holding people to a very high standard, Terrell, and I get that. Thanks a lot for the call. I think this is actually a fascinating and important conversation. Janet in Wardensville, West Virginia. Hey, Janet, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I'm a little nervous, though. What I'd like to say is welcome to the corporate government of the United States.
Yeah, the CSA, Corporate States of America.
Trump is gradually but surely demolishing all of our government. And I think we're going to see the end of it when he gets out of office.
Yeah. And what do we do about that, Janet?
I do everything that I can. Unfortunately, I don't have an income where I can travel everywhere, but I do whatever I can over the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk to my representative, which unfortunately is a Republican. And it just seems like I just keep looking at what's happening, and it's really upsetting.
Yeah, I understand. And I think, frankly, now it's more important to talk to Republican members of Congress than ever before. They need to be hearing from us, just like, the Tea Party was calling out Democratic members of Congress, basically intimidating them and whatnot. I'm not suggesting intimidation, but I think that we need to be reaching out to Republican members of Congress and let them know that we're here and we're not going to roll over. Janet, thank you for the call. You did a great job. Thank you so much. Adam in New Orleans, Louisiana. Hey, Adam, you survived the tornadoes?
We survived the tornadoes. It hit east of us, actually, fortunately.
Yeah.
A comment and a question, actually two questions. First comment is Trump seems to be looking for a Reichstag fire moment.
I believe so.
Way to seize power, and that's terrifying. I was listening to Al Franken's interview last week with Rachel Maddow, and he indicated that the Democrats have a strategy. And this was the point where they seemed to be caving on some of the people that were up for consideration by Congress. I'm completely baffled by their inability to obstruct.
Well, they've
been given a primer on how to do it by the GOP.
No, but what happened was when the Republicans were obstructing every single federal judge that President Obama was submitting to Congress, and they were using the filibuster to block them, when and appointments and federal appointments. Harry Reid was stuck in a situation where he basically, you could have the Obama administration half-staffed and federal judges, half-staffed, or not, by blowing up the filibuster. So Harry Reid blew up the filibuster. He pulled the nuclear option with regard to not legislation, but with regard to appointments, with the single exception of the Supreme Court. And so whether the efforts of the senator, the Democratic senator from Connecticut, to kind of sanitize Judge Gorsuch, saying last night on television, well, I think he's going to be a fair and honest broker, or words to that effect. Whether those work and they pick up 8 Democratic votes to put him on, or whether they don't, and whether it doesn't and there's going to be a filibuster, I don't know. I suspect it's probably going to give a lot of cover to some of the more conservative members of the Senate, or members of the Senate who are concerned about their reelection because they're in states that were carried by Trump. You could call them red states, I suppose. But that, the Democrats' ability to obstruct has been limited because Harry Reid ultimately had to limit the ability of Republicans to obstruct. So all that's left is basically the filibuster of a Supreme Court justice. So we'll see if they apply that. Well, actually, Ron Wyden, not Ron Wyden, Jeff Merkley has already said he's going to require 60 votes. For the last 8 years, the Republicans never used the word filibuster. I think most Americans don't realize that literally every nominee and every piece of legislation was filibustered that was presented by Democrats was filibustered by the Republicans, 100% of them for 8 years. And but they never used the word filibuster. They always said, we're going to require 60 votes. And so that's how Jeff Merkley is phrasing this now. I saw an interview with him the other day where a couple of times he said, so you're going to filibuster him? And he said, we're going to require 60 votes. And so, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So they're doing their best, Adam, but, you've got the rules of the Senate, and Mitch McConnell may well blow up that rule with regard to the Supreme Court. We'll just have to keep an eye on it. But, Adam, thank you for the call. I share your concern that not enough is being done, but, it's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Adam, thanks for the call. The Democrats, by the way, are having their retreat right now. They're trying to figure out, what do we do going forward? And I think in a week or two, they're going to be voting on who's going to be the new leader for the Democratic Party. It's going to get interesting. It's particularly going to get interesting if the Democrats decide to throw all in with the progressives.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls right after this. Oh, and we're going to check in with Talk Media News, too. And welcome back. Sam in Orange, Texas. Hey, Sam, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, my brother.
Hey.
I have a question first and then a suggestion. How many filibusters did the Republicans pull when they were in the minority, excuse me?
It's got to be multiple hundreds. I don't know the number.
Okay, I'll see if I can find that on the interweb. And do you think that is a good tactic for the Dems now?
Well, that's what they're doing. I mean, after having voted for the less controversial nominees, Kelly, Mattis, and there was one other one, they are now with these more controversial cabinet picks. They're fighting back, although they no longer have the filibuster for that. When it comes to legislation, you can bet there's going to be some serious trench fighting going on. I'm
towards the legislation.
Yeah.
That's going to come out of the
because they can still filibuster, right? Because they can still filibuster legislation.
Hopefully, when they set up a bill to privatize Social Security and destroy Medicare and Medicaid, I really hope to see a filibuster.
Well, here's the kicker, Sam, and this is the thing you've got to look out for. And they're planning on doing this with Obamacare. I honestly don't know if they can do it with Social Security and Medicare. I think they may be able to do it with Medicaid and possibly Medicare, in as much as they want to convert those to vouchers, and that has to do with money. But legislation that appropriates or spends funds can be passed by what's called budget reconciliation, because it's a budget. It's theoretically part of a budget bill, and reconciliation is not filibusterable. So if the Republicans submit legislation, coming out of the House and sending it to the Senate that repeals Obamacare, and they put it in a package that has appropriations attached to it, then and say we're doing this through reconciliation, then the Democrats will not be able to filibuster it. Ironically, that's how Obamacare was passed. It was passed by budget reconciliation, and so it only took 51 votes to pass. It was the only way that they could get it passed. So you know, we'll just have to watch and take these battles one at a time. Although it can get kind of dizzying. I mean, it's like every day that goes by, there's a new outrage, and you know, Trump has demonstrated that he is absolutely the master at manipulating the media. I mean, I come in here and I'm looking at all the topics I want to talk about, you know, and Tom Price, how he's enriching himself, and Scott Pruitt, how he wants to destroy the EPA, and you know, Jeff Sessions, how he wanted to put three African Americans, the Marion Three, put 3 African Americans in prison for 100 years each for simply helping elderly African Americans vote back in 1984, 5, and 6. You look at that and say, wow, I've got a show. And then Trump tweets out something about Nordstrom and his daughter, which is like just wild and you know, a violation of every ethical standard that we've ever held dear. And, you know, he could just completely changes the topic. And, you know, the rest of the media, I mean, I stuck to my guns, to my topics, but the rest of the media goes chasing it off like a dog after a car with a siren on it or something. I mean, it's just amazing. So it's gonna be a challenge, because the media is like I said, being manipulated by Trump. Sam, thanks a lot for the call. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and let's check in with Talk Media News, find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and free-don.org, and Don got freed, and that's a great thing. And with us on the line is Victoria Jones of Talk Media News. Hey, Victoria.
Hey, Tom.
So what's going on in the world today?
Representative Elijah Cummings, Democrat of Maryland, today asked House Oversight Committee Chairman Representative Jason Chaffetz to refer White House aide Kellyanne Conway for potential disciplinary action after she plugged Ivanka Trump's fashion and accessories line during an interview. And the interview was actually in the White House press briefing room. And in this letter, Cummings said that Conway's comments appear to be a textbook violation of ethics laws, and he recommended that it should be referred to the Office of Government Ethics. And he said that this was the Office of Government Ethics laws and regulations were enacted to prevent the abuse of an employee's government position, and he outlined the laws he thought that she may have been in violation of when she appeared on Fox News this morning and said, "Go buy Ivanka's stuff." She said, "I'm going to just give a free commercial here. Go buy it today, everybody. You can find it online."
Wow. Now, Brian Baird on this program, back when we were doing the show out of Portland, so this would have been, 7-8 years ago, he was a congressman from Washington State at the time, and sitting in the studio with me, and he said he told the story of walking into a Republican congressman's office and seeing several of his staffers day trading, and they were day trading based on their knowledge of legislation that was coming up. They were making big bucks. And he blew the whistle on this. Eventually, it got somewhat dialed back. But he went to the Speaker of the House, and he also went to the House Ethics Committee and said, "This is wrong. We've got to stop this." And in both cases, these Republicans said, "Nah, everything's good. There's no droids in this car." Do you really think that Jason Chaffetz is going to give a rat's patootie about Kellyanne Conway violating the ethics laws?
I will be surprised to see if it goes anywhere, to be honest with you.
Yeah, which is tragic. Now, just for the record, by the way, the president, by statute, is exempted from these rules, correct?
Yes, so is the vice president, is my understanding.
Right,
but
so
Kellyanne Conway is not exempted.
Right, so the president can tweet about his daughter's line of jewelry, but and clothing. And I heard the funniest line this morning. I think it was on CNN, it was on MSNBC. The guest that they had on, and I'm sorry, I don't remember her name. She said, if you want to make America great again, or words to the effect of, if you want to make America great again, don't buy Ivanka's stuff because it's made in Guatemala.
Yeah, a lot of it's made in Indonesia, Vietnam, and China.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So, and nobody seems to be pointing that out.
Yeah, there's quite a few tweets about it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So what else is up?
Two Democratic senators called on Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch today to publicly condemn President Trump's attacks on the judiciary. As you know, there's been a big flap because Gorsuch said to Senator Richard Blumenthal that he thought that Trump's attacks on federal judges were disheartening and demoralizing. And he also apparently said this to Senator Ben Sasse. And Trump then sent out a tweet today attacking Blumenthal over this and suggesting that he was misrepresenting it. But Schumer wants him to go public with it. It seems the indication is that Gorsuch won't. Now, in addition, Ron Bonjohn from the White House has also confirmed that Gorsuch said it, and Kellyanne Conway, the former Republican senator from New Jersey, who is the Sherpa, as they're called, who is shepherding Gorsuch around, has also confirmed that he did say this.
Wait a minute, you just said Kellyanne Conway?
Sorry, Kelly Ayotte.
Oh, Kelly Ayotte.
I'm so sorry, Kelly. Yeah. Kelly Ayotte. Who's the former senator from New Hampshire.
Right.
She is shepherding him around, and she's also confirmed that he said it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now, I'm curious, in Trump's tweet attacking the senator from Connecticut, he said that the guy lied about Vietnam service. I mean,
he was untruthful about his Vietnam service, yes, on more than one occasion, and it was exposed by the New York Times, and he then copped to it.
So, but it's like the politics of personal destruction. I mean, this is the Trump who a couple of days ago, when he was told that a state senator in Texas wanted to make sure that people couldn't have their assets seized until after they've been convicted of a crime, he said, you know, what's his name? I'll destroy his, do you want me to destroy his career? Now, it's being characterized by the Republicans as a joke, but it seems to be consistent with, you know, this vindictive bully streak that Trump has.
Well, it's very interesting. The report in Politico of that incident was interesting because it said something that many of the other reports didn't. It said that many of the sheriffs in the room laughed, but Donald Trump did not.
Yeah. I think he was dead serious. What else is going on in the world?
At the swearing-in ceremony for Attorney General Jeff Sessions today, President Trump signed 3 executive orders related to immigration and law enforcement. Now, details on the orders have not been immediately available. But Trump said of Sessions that he will be a great protector of the people. Now, the orders, the first one, he said he was directing the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security to, quote, undertake all necessary and lawful action to break the back of the criminal cartels that have spread across our nation and are destroying the blood of our youth and other people, many other people, enforcing federal law with respect to the transnational criminal organization in preventing international trafficking. The second order would direct the Department of Justice to form a task force on reducing violent crime in America, and later he described it as a task force on crime reduction and public safety. And the third one would direct the Department of Justice to implement a plan to stop crimes and crimes of violence against law enforcement officers.
Interesting. Quick question, Victoria. How long do you think it'll be before Jeff Sessions starts enforcing federal marijuana laws and shuts down medical dispensaries and recreational pot all over the country?
Well, I know that the marijuana lobby doesn't want that to happen, but 6 months?
6 months? Yikes! Victoria Jones, thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Thom Hartmann here with Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back. This is from page 218. The subhead is, If Corporations Are Persons, Why Aren't There Crimes in the Crime Statistics? Every year, the Federal Bureau of Investigation issues a press release on its Uniform Crime Reporting Program, which determines the nation's crime index. It reports crimes by persons, which excludes, strangely enough, corporate persons, even when the corporations have been convicted of felonies. In its entire history, the FBI has never issued a report on crimes by corporate persons, although its reports on crimes by human persons are well-researched and well-publicized. The upshot of this is that when you ask people how most money and property are stolen or how most people are killed, they think of burglars and muggers and bank robbers and crimes of passion. They think of human persons. The reality, though, is that more money and property are stolen by or lost to corporate criminals than to human criminals. Russell Mochaber's corporate crime reporter noted that in 1998, when the FBI estimated robberies and burglaries at almost $4 billion, the cost of corporate crimes was in the hundreds of billions, as it is every year. These include security scams that ran around $15 billion that year, car repair fraud that hit around $40 billion that year, insurance swindles and corporate fraud found on your health insurance, HMO, and hospital billings that runs between $100 and $400 billion a year, 100 times greater than all the burglaries in the country combined. Then there are the occasional really big crimes like Neil Bush's savings and loans scandal that then Attorney General Dick Thornburgh called the biggest white-collar swindle in history, or the actions of banksters and defense contractors that get no investigations whatsoever from either the Bush or the Obama administrations. More people die as a result of corporate activity than because of the actions of deranged killers or overwrought spouses. According to the Corporate Crime Reporter, the FBI reported that 1998 saw about 19,000 Americans murdered at the hands of other people. But that same year, 56,000 people died from work-related diseases like black lung and asbestosis that went unreported by the FBI. And many times that number died from the silent violence of pollution, contaminated food, hazardous consumer products, and hospital malpractice. Much of the human death caused by corporate activity has arguable benefits. For example, the many cancers caused by compounds associated with plastics or pesticides. But the cost of these deaths isn't factored into the unit cost of the products. So there's no financial incentive for industry to develop toxin-free or toxin-reduced alternatives or to use the more expensive but less toxic alternatives that already exist. This is a process known as internalizing profits and externalizing costs. The corporation profits from the toxins, and the public pays for the cancers, both in healthcare costs and lost productivity from sick and dying workers. It's been a standard operating procedure for centuries and was pushed back against for only a few decades in the 1960s and 70s, with the consumer movement that came out of the publication of Rachel Carlson's book Silent Spring and Ralph Nader's book Unsafe at Any Speed. Since the Reagan administration, however, dumping externalities on the public has become a common and accepted practice across the business spectrum. One of the easiest ways to do it is to simply move the toxin-producing or toxin-using factory or process to a country with lax environmental and labor laws like China or Vietnam, so that not only are labor costs lowered, but more importantly, the cost of dealing with externalities like workmen's compensation from injury and exposure and toxic emissions and death in the workplace, so that all those costs drop to zero or close to it. And then there are the big mistakes. In 1998, one of America's largest meatpacking companies replaced a refrigerating unit on one of its processing lines. Shortly thereafter, the detectors it had in place on the line to look for the deadly cold-loving bacteria like Listeria monocytogenes started to react, indicating high levels of bacterial contamination. The company's response was immediate. Carolyn Smith DeWall of the Center for Science and the Public Interest told reporters Russell Mochaber and Robert Weissman, quote, "Then their studies started coming up positive, so they stopped testing. This company's Fourth Amendment right to privacy blocked surprise inspections by the government." They're a person, right? The detectors were apparently turned off for a full month before the Centers for Disease Control frantically tried to find the source of the bacteria that was killing people, mostly children, all over the United States. Used DNA fingerprinting to track the bacteria that was causing the nationwide outbreak of Listeria back to the plant, provoking a nationwide recall of millions of pounds of the product. But during that month, hundreds of people consuming this company's products were sickened by Listeria, and 21 humans died from it. U.S. Attorney's Office, according to Mochaber and Weissman, said, quote, "There was insufficient evidence to bring a felony charge against the company. Instead, the company paid a $200,000 fine and issued an unprecedented joint press release with the Bush administration's USDA that managed to say that the company had paid the fine without ever mentioning the brand name of the product that had contaminated and caused the deaths." This is truly amazing. I mean, corporate crime costs us more and kills more people, and we don't even talk about it. It's amazing. Anyhow, the book is Unequal Protection: How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back. From The Observed. The book is The Prophet.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and super pleased to have Candy Mossett back with us. She's a Native Energy and Climate Campaign organizer with the Indigenous Environmental Network. IENEarth.org is the website. You can find an action near you today that way. And you can tweet at MHAWEA or at IENEarth. Candy, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Thanks for joining us. I'm hearing all kinds of stories out of Standing Rock. I heard that the tribal elder, Dave Archibald, as I recall, is saying, don't come right now, get active in your local community. On the other hand, I've heard that a lot of people are going there. But the warning is, look out. The police are going to be militarized. They're going to be charging people with felonies. Horrible things might happen. You know, what's going on? What is the status of Standing Rock?
Yeah, so as you can about imagine, given that the Army Corps did grant the easement to drill, the entire community is experiencing the reaction in different ways. And so David Archambault is the tribal chairman, and the call has been for national actions to defund DAPL, to continue taking money out of the banks, and to continue ensuring that as this project moves forward under the Trump administration, people are still making this project not feasible. Last night, I was getting reports and pictures of drilling commencing, starting at around 5:15 Central Time last night. Drilling meaning that they have to drill the hole and bore underneath the Missouri. And anytime, I think that the company itself estimated that the oil could be flowing through the pipe, if all goes their way, within 83 days. The tribe, however, is fighting back in legal measures, and so they are suing the company. They are suing, they're first going after a temporary restraining order and injunction, so a TRO, and that would halt the construction effectively if a judge were to grant a TRO. And still continuing to push for the environmental impact statement, which is something that started under the Obama administration, and then the Trump administration came in and said, nope, just kidding, we're not going to do an environmental impact statement, even though thousands and thousands and thousands of comments were already submitted. And so the urge is to call the Army Corps of Engineer offices and say you're not above the law. This type of environmental impact statement is to ensure that when a leak should occur, everybody downstream, which is 18 million people, would understand the impacts. Specifically, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe right there would understand the impacts of a leak. And that is why an environmental impact statement, rather than just an environmental assessment, is so important. And so the reason the chairman is not calling people to come back is because it's been very cold, and the Army Corps of Engineers has already said that they're giving anybody in the camp until February 22nd before they have, I guess, once again said they're going to move in. If you'll remember, this happened back December 5th, too, when the campers were given an ultimatum. So people are continuing to come in a last stand effort against the drilling processes that are happening on the ground right now, probably as we speak, and other people are taking action in their own communities to make the whole entire thing not profitable. And if you were watching, the Seattle City Council did approve unanimously in a 9-0 vote to divest from the Wells Fargo Bank, and that was a $3 billion blow to Wells Fargo, which sent a message that banks funding this project are going to continue to be under attack.
Yeah, and I have to say, I had an account with one of the big banks that I closed yesterday, and I went in and I told the vice president of the bank. I mean, he's just a local guy. He gets a fancy title, but why? And he said, I'll pass this up the food chain. I also back in January, on January 5th, there was a text. A number or an address or something that you could text to get on the text list for DAPL or for no DAPL. And they posted, and I got a text back on January 5th that said, call the Army Corps, tell them to start the EIS process. We'll stay vigilant until they do. And they gave a phone number. I don't know if that's still good, but they've given it out twice. They did it again on January 24th. And if that number is good, I'll give it out on the air here. And then the text I got from them yesterday at 4:33 said, Trump says Dakota Access Pipeline wasn't controversial. Let's show him these lies won't fly. March on D.C. with us on March 10th. Now, am I getting the right texts from the right people, and is this stuff all accurate?
You are. Those are accurate. Share the number. I believe it's a 202 number. It's an Army Corps number. This Trump administration is acting above the law and outside of the law. To completely turn off and change the decision of an EIS that's already started is actually unheard of. There's a lot of things that are unheard of with this Republican-led administration. And the Republicans need to step it up because this is their ball is in their court. And as far as I'm concerned, all of the things that are happening are because of a Republican-led administration that's not telling this Trump person that he is acting outside of the law, taking total disregard, lack of disregard for treaty rights, violations of human rights. All of these things that occurred didn't just disappear because we had a new president. In fact, they're being amplified. We have more police on the ground at Standing Rock. And if people don't know, a lot of the cases are being tried right there in North Dakota. And people in the first round, 8 people were found guilty for very crazy charges as a result of not being able to get a fair trial. None of these court cases should be being held in the state of North Dakota. And so the Legal Defense Fund still needs a lot of help too. We have over 700 arrestees now. And you're looking at probably just enough for around 3,000 or 4,000 per person, which is not nearly enough to pay for all of the legal costs, the traveling back and forth, all the court cases. So we're still asking people to donate to the Legal Defense Fund, the Water Protectors Legal Defense Fund.
How do they do that?
There's a website that you can go to. There's a Facebook page you can go to, Water Protectors Legal Defense Fund. If you Google that, it'll also bring it up as well. I should grab my computer here, but that is what people keep asking. What can we do? How can we continue to help in this fight? Those are the most important ways. There's going to be a march in Washington, D.C. on March 10th. We were going to take everybody to D.C. and show them, hey, we're still here. This issue is not over. And I think people really need to understand the big picture, too. There's still fracking in the Bakken, where this oil is coming from. The Dakota Access Pipeline is a symptom of that larger problem of the fracking that's occurring. And what Trump is doing is effectively pitting all of these different pipelines against each other, even though the levels of oil that are being produced are going down, creating something bad to come in the future.
Yeah, not to mention
that.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm just saying that's what he's doing. He's creating.
Not to mention the damage it's doing to our environment. I mean, our planet is melting down. The Arctic is melting. Everything from microscopic species to polar bears to the humans who are living in the north of 60 degrees latitude are experiencing a crisis right now. The Arctic is 30 degrees Celsius, like 50 degrees warmer than it's Fahrenheit than it's supposed to be or normally is. All largely because of fossil fuel burning here around the world, and this just adds to that. By the way, the phone number that was texted to me by the No DAPL folks was 844. This is a toll-free number, 844-331-6920 to reach the Army Corps of Engineers. And
please do, because they need to be held accountable too for changing their minds, even though they've been given pressure. And the pressure is coming from this president, who is in a Republic-led office, but they are actually being led by the industry. If you look at who's making the shots, who's making the calls, it's people like Kelsey Warren, and one step above that, it's people like the Koch brothers that have interest in the oil industry. These oil giants are now practically running the country as Donald Trump continues to be their talking head and pushing their agenda. It's no secret that he is a climate change denier, that he was given money by Kelsey Warren as he was running for his campaign.
Who's Kelsey Warren?
All he's doing. Kelsey Warren is the CEO of Energy Transfer Partners, which is the company that is building the Dakota Access.
Right. I understand he owns stock in the company as well.
That's right. He owns stock. It's completely unheard of. And Donald Trump, should be taken for crimes against humanity and for having vested interest in these kind of things.
Yeah.
If we don't want this country to continue to be run by the Koch brothers, who have nothing but fossil fuel interests, we have to continue to defund these projects. It doesn't just stop here because this easement was granted. We've braced ourselves for this since November, since the elections, when we found out that this was going to be not only a Republican-led party, but a Donald Trump Republican-led party. And over the next maybe 4 years, we'll see. Any president has a mandate to listen to what their people are saying. And loud and clear, the people are saying they do not want these energy projects. He's not listening to the American public as president.
And Candy, all these people, these thousands of people who've been arrested at Standing Rock, they're all facing felony charges, are they not? I mean, we're talking multiple years in prison if they can't get a good defense, and most of them can't afford pretty much any defense at all. Do I have that right?
Right.
So at your website, at ienearth.org, as in Indigenous Environmental Network, ienearth.org, do you have a link to where people can donate money to help out?
Yes, we have links on our website. You can also go to indigenousrising.org. Indigenous Rising is our more specific campaigns when we're working on different things that are happening throughout Indian country. So that's indigenousrising.org. You can go to the various links that are posted and let people continue to contribute to the Legal Defense Fund, because these cases are continuing over the next several months, maybe even years, as people are looking at years in prison. I mean, for being a water protector, it's insane. It's unheard of. There are people that have children. A lot of the people, including myself, that went to Standing Rock to fight back, have kids, the little kids. My daughter's 3. What's going to happen if these people go to prison?
Yeah, no, it'll be a disaster. I mean, this is and what astonishes me, Candy, we're talking with Candy Mossett. She's the Native Energy and Climate Campaign organizer with the Indigenous Environmental Network, EINearth.org. The thing that amazes me, Candy, is how little coverage this is getting in the corporate media. Any idea why?
Well, that's because the Koch brothers control the country right now, and they're going to do everything they can to provide their own propaganda. There are going to be all kinds of ads and commercials coming out about jobs and how great these jobs are, without any regard for the fact that there are no jobs on a dead planet. And the president right now is pushing for some number of thousands of jobs between the Keystone XL pipeline and the Dakota Access pipeline, but he's not telling the American public the truth. There's going to be anywhere between 60 and 80 permanent jobs, and I'm being generous in saying 60 to 80 permanent jobs between both of those pipelines.
No, I agree. And the union leaders of the pipe fitters and steel welders or whatever they are, you know, there's a couple of union leaders who popped in with Donald Trump and endorsed this. They are, in my opinion, just, traitors to the cause. That I realize it's strong language, but I get it that they're supposed to represent their people, and they do want jobs. And if you want jobs, let's work for, card check for everybody. There's a lot of ways to create jobs in America, short of destroying the planet and breaking treaties. So,
but the most important thing, people cannot get stuck in apathy. People cannot say this is just the way it is and go about your everyday life. People right now across the world need to stand up and push back in whatever way makes sense for them in their communities. You can go to your city councils, tribal councils, if that's what it is, state representatives, and tell them that you are not happy with a situation. Don't just sit there and complain about it. Don't just talk to your friends about it. Don't go on Facebook and complain about it. Go to the legal system. Go to the representatives that represent your city, your town, your community, your state, and continue making calls to the White House. Continue sending letters.
And call for more divestment as well. Candy Mossett.
Defundapple.org.
I'm sorry?
Defundapple.org. It
Thank
shows
you.
you the 17 banks and how to divest.
Okay, great. Candy Mossett, thank you very much, Candy. Great talking with you. We'll be right back. And welcome back. Bill in 9 Mile Falls, Washington. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Well, I guess I have a frustration that it seems like everybody, it's so easy to blame Trump for everything that's going on when the fact is he's just a Republican trying to enact a Republican agenda that's been going on for years. You couldn't slap the smile off Paul Ryan's face, and I just wish there'd be more effort to tie Trump to the Republicans so the next election cycle they can't come along and say, well, that was all Trump. We need a good conservative to fix it.
Right. I agree. I absolutely agree. The stuff that Trump is doing, by and large, some of the fear-mongering. Well, if John McCain was president, he ran 8 years ago. If Mitt Romney was president, he ran 4 years ago. I don't think that there would be much difference in policy. Romney might not do as much fear-mongering. I think McCain probably would have done this much or more.
Well, my frustration is like last week you had Congressman Pocan on, and as far as he says, Trump changed the rules. It wasn't Trump. It was Orrin Hatch, a lifelong conservative Republican. It wasn't some crazy guy. It was just a down.
Which rule did Orrin Hatch change?
Pardon me?
Which rule did Orrin Hatch change?
As far as when the Democrats boycotted the hearing, and he says, "Oh, we don't need a quorum. We can just vote with what we got."
Right.
And Pocan said, I'm assuming that's what they were talking about, but Pocan says, Trump changed the rules. No, it was the Republicans that changed the rules.
Right.
And the old Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line, and holy cow, did they fall in line. The only truthful thing Trump ever said was, I could shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any of my supporters, and he wouldn't.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Bill, thanks. Thanks for the call. It's a thoughtful analysis. I appreciate it. Jim in Oak Park, Illinois. Hey, Jim, what's up? Thanks for watching Free Speech.
Yeah, I think I've got a plan to get McConnell to pay attention to what's happening in the country.
Right.
I go to Pensacola a lot from the Chicago area, and I simply refuse to spend any money in Kentucky. I realize that Indiana and Tennessee are both Republican states, but if everybody traveling on the interstates would boycott the businesses along the interstates.
Because Mitch McConnell's the senator from Kentucky, is that why?
Right. And
if you want that to have impact, Jim, if you want that to have impact, the way to do it is to stop at all those various rest stops in Kentucky and go in and buy a pack of gum or something and say, I really need some water and a sandwich, but I'm refusing to buy anything over $2 in Kentucky because Mitch McConnell's your senator, so I'll wait until I get to Tennessee to buy that. And let the word percolate up. But if you don't speak out, probably nobody will realize what you're doing. But that's interesting. Jim, you're doing a one-man boycott. Good on you. Thanks a lot for the call. We'll be back. It's 25 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And Chris in Bellingham, Washington, listening on KBAI. Hey, Chris, what's up?
Well, I just wanted to talk to you about something I heard a few minutes ago and also on your program on RT the other night. Regardless of how you feel about the Dakota Access or Keystone, or any other project. Oh, I should preface my statement by saying I'm a union laborer, a member of the building trades union, and when people say that they're just temporary jobs, you totally discount my work, because all of my work is a temporary job. We go from one job to another, a sewer line, a water line, a road, a bridge. And so that's a bad argument.
Chris, do you think that there were still trade unions in Germany in the 30s? Do you think that the trade unionists who built Auschwitz and Dachau should have said, no, that's not a good job?
Well,
is there a point at which you say this is not right? I'm not going to do it.
Tom.
I'm sorry?
That's not the point. That's not the point I'm trying to make.
Well, the point that I'm trying to make, though, is that these pipelines and the burning of fossil fuels are destroying our planet. It's killing people. It's literally killing people. I mean, right now, it's killing people with cancers and asthma. But it's also killing, and you've got climate refugees all over the world. The whole Syrian thing is because of climate change. It's because 1 million farmers got displaced from their land because the desert has moved 100 miles south in Syria. So the pipeline jobs are destroying the world. At what point do you say, no, I'm not going to help build Auschwitz?
Well, I might say that.
Okay. Well, I hope that people working on the pipeline say that. Chris, thanks for the call. I do not diminish your job. I respect your job. But there are some jobs that I don't think any of us should be doing. Chris, thank you so much. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with your calls after this. As of this morning, nearly 130,000 Facebook users have, quote, checked in. So this is all over social media because people actually care, right? People want to know what's going on. White people, too. But is it going to make it into... Is it going to make it into the corporate media? Have you seen anything in the corporate media?
I mean, occasionally there's a passing reference. Oh, those crazy Indians, they're talking about sacred land. We all know land isn't sacred. You pay property taxes on land. Land is property. Right? There's nothing alive there. Ancestors, what are you talking about? Come on. That's not our culture. See, this is the riff. I mean, this is a third of the book, The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, is where we say we are an inclusive country. Everybody's welcome. It's the great melting pot. Isn't that a wonderful thing? But there's really a subset message to that. I mean, that's the principal message, and that's the myth that we live out. But the fact of the matter is that if you want to be successful in this society, you need to learn to talk like a white person, to behave like a white person, to plug into the white power structure in this country. White privilege is real. And people of color can sometimes acquire a little bit of it, as it were. But never the whole thing. Of course, never the whole thing. So how much is the fact that the corporate media in the United States, which is virtually entirely white-controlled, virtually entirely, the vast majority of the producers are white, the vast majority of the reporters are white, the vast majority of the executives are white, the owners and the large stockholders are virtually all white. What kind of impact does that have on what kind of news gets covered? And how that news gets covered? Now, you ask minorities in this country, they'll tell you we've been noticing it for years and years. I remember back in the 60s, I played a Dick Gregory album, The Light Side, The Dark Side, four sides, back to back, the whole thing, when I was doing an all-night progressive rock show, and I got fired for it. The only time I've ever been fired. WVIC in Lansing, Michigan. And you've probably heard, I've told the story before, so I'm not going to repeat it. But one of the points that Dick Gregory made in that album, and over the years, I've gotten to know him. We've been to Europe together. We've been to Africa together. His son is my chiropractor. it's like he's a great guy. He lives here in D.C. now. He's been on this program. In fact, most recently, just 6 months ago or so. And he made the comment that the only images growing up as a young black man in St. Louis, Missouri, that the only images that he saw of black women were basically Aunt Jemima. And he made the joke, and I never wanted to have sex with Aunt Jemima, or words to that effect. And that was, back then, it was like the media was just like so clearly, so completely a white-controlled media, as it were. And it was of, by, and for essentially white people. People of color pretty much didn't exist in our media, except as character actors. And the characters, of course, were always bad guys, or stupid people, or buffoons. And, yes, that started to change with the primetime rule when you got independent production companies producing television programs in the 70s and 80s, and it started getting better in the 90s, and it's better today. You're seeing, more diversity on television, but it still doesn't reflect the diversity of America. And it doesn't even begin to reflect the people who were the original, any part of the lives of the people who were the original occupants of this continent. So I'm of the opinion that the reason that you're seeing no Standing Rock coverage, if you want to get Standing Rock coverage, you gotta tune in Amy Goodman or listen to this program, basically. The reason why is that it's not white people. Now, I know when I go off on these rants about white privilege, I get all these conservative callers telling me I'm nuts. Feel free. Convince me I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong about this. Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, a lot happened during the break. I got an email from Donald J. Trump saying that I can buy inaugural beanies that were $30 before for only $18 now. Yep, they're still selling gifts and merchandise out of the White House. I think this is the re-election committee. It's the Donald J. Trump 45 committee or whatever it is. But, you know, they're still hustling money. In fact, they raised, I believe it was $18 million last month doing this for the re-election. Keep in mind, Trump filed for re-election in 2020, I guess it would be. And he filed that on the day of his inauguration. So this guy's planning on 8 years, and he's raising the money for it. That happened. I just got another email from the bank that I was talking about. I don't want to, name the bank on the air, but I will give you a list of the banks in just a moment, where I closed an account yesterday, and they say information is available for your closed account. View your closed account ending in, and they give the numbers online. Your deposit account ending in numbers was closed on 2/7/2017. You can continue to view statements and documents for this account online for approximately 90 days. If you have any questions, please call us. Right. And then it says, thank you, we appreciate your business. No, thank you very much, but no thanks. So Candy mentioned the website defund DAPL, as in Dakota Access Pipeline, .org. Defund, D-E-F-U-N-D, DAPL.org. And if you go over to defunddapl.org, you'll find a list of the banks that are funding the Dakota Access Pipeline. And without these banks loaning this corporation the money, they can't build this thing. They can't finish it. In fact, it says the oil companies behind the pipeline are rich, but they aren't rich enough to shell out the whole amount needed to build the pipeline at once. If Citibank, the Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi, Mizuho Bank, and TD Securities were to hold back the remaining $1.4 billion, the cash for the pipeline could dry up and the project would come grinding to a potentially permanent halt. And here's a list of the banks that are funding the Dakota Access Pipeline. If you have your money in one of these, you might want to move it to a local credit union. Very simple. Wells Fargo, PNB Paribas, DNB Capital, BBVA Securities, SunTrust, Sumitomo Mitsui Bank, Credit Agricole, ABN AMRO Capital, Intesa Sao Paulo, ING Bank. Actually, I'm only going to read the ones that I know are doing business in the United States because there's a bunch of foreign banks in here. Citizens Bank, U.S. Bank, PNC Bank, Barclays, JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, Royal Bank of Canada, UBS, Goldman Sachs, which has, 7 people now in Trump's inner circle, Morgan Stanley, HSBC Bank. HSBC was the one that was busted for funding or money laundering for terrorists, literally terrorists, like Middle Eastern terrorists and drug dealers, and Origin Bank. So they've got the logos and they've got the phone numbers that you can call these banksters and the information, the name of the CEO's email addresses, everything. It's all over at defunddapl.org. So check it out. In addition to that, Donald Trump, this is from Daily Kos today. Trump kicks off program of deporting dangerous lawbreakers. Yep, he started in Phoenix with a mother. Yep, Trump's program of increased deportation of immigrants is written by Mark Sumner. Trump's program of increased deportation of immigrants cranked up on Wednesday when an Arizona woman was taken away in front of her crying children, by the way, who are U.S. citizens, and put in a van for Mexico after more than 2 decades of peacefully living in the United States. Guadalupe Garcia de Reos is a convicted felon, but her felony was being caught in a workplace raid more than a decade ago and being charged with working in the country illegally. Not exactly what most people had in mind when Trump said he would first go after criminal immigrants. So the question in my mind, and then also in this post over at Daily Kos, actually I think it was Ruben Bowling posted this, a list of, it says, illegals pose public safety threat. Those who are defying our immigration laws are a dangerous menace committing other crimes that harm and kill Americans. Who are these people? Well, they list Tyson Foods, hired illegal immigrants. Walmart stores, used contractor who hired illegal immigrants. ExxonMobil Corporation, fuel depot shut down after illegal immigrants found cleaning up hazardous materials. And Donald J. Trump conspiring to hire illegal immigrants on a building project. Which raises the question, you know, prior to 1986, when Reagan stopped the practice, prior to 1986, if a wealthy white employer in the United States decided to hire somebody who was not a citizen of the United States and did not have a green card or a work permit, the employer was who got arrested and fined or sent to jail. Post-1986, it is the immigrant themselves who gets arrested and deported or sent to jail. So we went from stopping the magnet that was drawing people into this country to allowing that magnet to be here and just nailing the people as they come into the country. When are we going to start prosecuting these rich, white, largely white corporations and their CEOs and the people making decisions in them who are breaking our immigration laws and encouraging others to? There's a broadsheet, a newspaper that you can find in the border towns in Mexico in Spanish that's nothing but help wanted ads from American companies north of the border saying, hey, if you can get here, I got a job for you. Which video? Oh, from Dakota Access? Which other one? Oh, great. Okay, we've got some video of this. Let's play that. This is the I'm sorry, I didn't have a chance to preview this before we went on the air, so I forgot we had it. Okay, here, this is from the arrest in Phoenix yesterday.
I was at school, and it was
This Arizona mother could be one of Trump's first deportees, it says. And she's speaking in Spanish. She's crying next to her child. Or these are her children crying.
until I went home, and I didn't see it there.
Arpaio's raid tore apart this family. For 6 long months, this little girl's mother was in detention. The reason? Working.
Duramos 3 meses con el Arpaio.
Can you take down the Chirons? I spent 3 months. What helped me was when I was in there, I was able to see my children. When it was time to say goodbye, my daughter's eyes would fill with tears, and it made me break down. I would go back to my bed and tell God, I cannot take this anymore. Help me, I can't handle this. Everything seems so lost that I no longer wanted to continue. Sitting here with her 2 children and presumably her husband. I am fighting for the dream of my children. And then they cannot understand why they must be separated from their mother, why they must leave this country that is theirs. They are American citizens, and it is unfair that they have to go.
Why would they want to do that?
And one of the kids says, why are they going to do this? And he just breaks down in tears. I will continue to fight for the dream of my children because I want the best for them. Our children are American citizens. I do not want their dreams to be thrown away. It's amazing. It's just absolutely amazing. And upsetting. Amazing. John in Champaign, Illinois. Hey, John, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how's it going? I went, we got Chris Kennedy going to run for governor here, man, next year. Okay, we got a boycott. Like your banks, boycott the corporations. Where does the lobbyist money come from? The corporations pay them, but they actually jack up the price of what people buy as consumers. We are paying for these lobbyists to screw us over.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely true, John. You articulated it very clearly and very well, and it's, I mean, this is the Republican scam. And John, thanks for the call. We've got a political party in the United States that is entirely corrupted by big corporate money, particularly money from the fossil fuel industry. Do you know one Republican who doesn't deny climate change? Why do they do that? Because they get millions of dollars from the Kochs, from Exxon, from the fossil fuel industry.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
I mean, this is like the 1890s. You know, this is like the period that led to the progressive revolt in the Republican Party in 1900. And welcome back. Is it Cloud or Claude in Monroe, New York, watching us on YouTube? Am I saying your name right? Claude? Claude, you've got to, if you're watching, you've got to listen. When you call in, you've got to listen to your phone because there's a time delay between the time that we're doing the program live and the time that you actually see it. So call back and we'll put you on. Will in Fremont, California. Will, you're listening to Sirius XM. They're in commercial break. Let me go to Justin in Lithonia, Georgia. Hey, Justin, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for watching us on YouTube, Justin. What's up?
Always. I got a question. You know, yesterday I was actually working out, and I get your updates on my YouTube, on my news feed from your show, and you were talking about opposition to Donald Trump and whether it will strengthen his base like it did Reagan.
Yeah.
And, you know, my question is that, you know, that's true. I think that's probably true, especially, you know, every time somebody does something, you know, he kind of takes the victim role. They're coming against me. You know, his daughter just got, you know, her clothing line dropped from Nordstrom's, and they're like, you know, now they discriminating against us. But at the same time, isn't it important for people to, even though through opposition, constantly expose the lies that are being put out by his administration when it comes to policies and reasons behind what he does?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do that every single day on this program. And I'm not going to stop.
Right. And so in saying that, you know, because it was, I agree with that. I was just like, dang, you know, when you were saying, you know, is it going to strengthen his base? You know, if we continue to do this and it strengthens his base, that does not mean that we shouldn't stop doing it.
Right. I agree. It's, you know, polarization happens. But, you know, Reagan's policies have devastated the middle class of America. And the real tragedy of both the Clinton and the Obama administrations, in my opinion, is that in neither case did the Democrats come out and point that out in a very clear, very, you know, straightforward way. I mean, Donald Trump comes out and goes, "Oh, Obama was weak on foreign policy," and that meme just propagates right through the whole, you know, everything, and people start to believe it. Democrats never pointed out the damage that Bush did. They never pointed out the damage that Bush the senior did. They never pointed out the damage that Reagan did. And by damage, I'm talking about damage to the average working person. I think if they had done a better job of communicating that damage, that there's no way that we would have Trump as president right now.
So it's really up to, you know, well, you know, unlike, you know, back in the 80s with social media, you know, we can keep that message consistently going and not let Trump's administration kind of take that approach of saying, well, we'll just wear people out.
Until they destroy the internet.
Well, yeah, with net neutrality.
Yeah.
But there's still got to be ways around that, though.
I think so. And I think, you know, I think this is like water flowing downhill now. It's people are waking up, the movements are happening. And the people who are, you know, basically supporting Trump, by and large, are people over 40 years old who are white, and they're in many cases over 50, and they're fading away. So many of them are dying off. So I think change is coming, and our job is to tell people about what the possibilities are, what people can do, and how to get active. And Justin, you know, thank you for watching our show on YouTube. This is one of the, you know, great vehicles for progressive activism. And I appreciate it. Thank you very much. We'll be back. And thanks for the call. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back. Coming up on 10 minutes before the hour here, Will in Fremont, California, listening on Sirius XM. Hey, Will, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I've actually been listening to your show for maybe about a month now, and you were talking about the immigration thing. And I'm just curious, why is the conversation always about deporting people to Mexico, but not a lot of the people from the European countries that may be here in quote-unquote in illegal status?
Right.
I don't hear enough of that type of conversation.
It's because they're white. This is all, all of this rhetoric coming out of the Republican Party is hysteria about people of color. It really and truly is. Yesterday, there was a proposal put forward to cut legal immigration from the Trump administration, to cut legal immigration in the United States in half. Right now, 1 million people a year are allowed to legally come into the United States with green cards and start the path towards citizenship. And prior to 1965, Will, and this is a really important point, Pat Buchanan basically wrote a book about this in which he was freaking out about it. Oh, my God, America's getting browner. But prior to 1965, the law was that that when we assign different countries the number of potential immigrants that they can send to the United States or that we will accept, that the people from those countries have to represent the proportion of people of those ancestries in the United States. Now, given that the majority of people in the United States, a little over 70%, are white Europeans or of white European ancestry, what was happening was that over 70% of all immigrants had to be white people from Europe. And that was the law. It was the way of keeping a white majority in the United States. And probably the two most revolutionary things that Lyndon Johnson did in 1965 were signing the Voting Rights Act and signing the Immigration and Naturalization Act, Update Act, which said that we're no longer going to have these basically race-based quotas, only they were defined as nationality-based, but, what the hell, it was the same thing functionally. And that we are going to open up immigration to all countries and all continents, from Africa, from Southern Asia, from Asia. And as a result of that, from 1965 until today, we've had a much larger share of people of color coming into the United States. And that has contributed to the browning of America that Pat Buchanan, in his last book, the one that got him kicked off CNN, said is going to be the death of American civilization. Right. And now the Trump administration is saying, let's cut that immigration in half. Legal immigration. I'm not talking about illegal immigration. I'm talking legal immigration. Let's cut that in half. Why? Too many brown people coming into this country. That's the subtext of virtually everything that the Republicans are doing, because they're still running the Southern strategy. They're still shouting out to the Jeff Sessions of the world, to the white racist base. And the white racist base gets it. They understand this language. It's dog whistle, but it's clear. Am I making sense, Will?
Absolutely. Hey, I appreciate what you're doing. Please continue to put the message out there. I will continue to listen to you.
You got it. Thank you.
Satisfied with that answer.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for listening to Sirius XM. Beverly in McHenry, Illinois. Hey, Beverly, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Concerning this immigration thing, and I don't know that you know this, maybe someone else listening, wouldn't this poor woman, along with maybe these DACA and other people who have registered, isn't that entrapment? If she did for the last 7 years by going to her like probation officer, whatever you call this organization,
right,
to say, I'm still here, it's another year, I behaved myself, blah, blah, blah. How now she did what she was supposed to or required to do, and they used it against her?
Yes, they knew where she was. They knew where she was because she had registered, or at least I believe that to be the case. I mean, I don't have firsthand knowledge of this, but I believe that to be the case.
Wouldn't entrapment work under something like that?
It would have been if it was done under the Obama administration, arguably. I mean, you could probably make that case in court because the law and the enforcement of the law, the regulations, keep in mind, the law is fairly broad. And so the way that the law is applied is decided by the agencies and by in the executive branch, which is basically under the control of the president. And what President Obama said was, if you're here and you're not a criminal and you're not engaging in criminal activity, tell us you're here and we'll leave you alone. But then Trump came in and now that rule has been thrown out. That rule no longer exists. So all those people who registered themselves are now right in the crosshairs. And, this is a human tragedy. It's a social and cultural tragedy. But functionally, de facto, it is entrapment. You're absolutely right, Beverly. But de jure, at law, I don't believe it's entrapment any longer. The immigration laws are the immigration laws, and they're right there.
I would just love to see us, the progressives, or somebody fight like the Republicans do. And maybe that's not the best use of it, or maybe it won't succeed. But why doesn't somebody start fighting some of these lawsuits and say, let's try?
Oh, I guarantee you it's happening. I guarantee you that there are immigrant rights groups in the United States, and there are Hispanic affiliated groups, because the principal target of this is people from Mexico and south of Mexico, and in my opinion, because of the color of their skin. I've heard the Republicans say, oh, no, we should be welcoming Mexican immigrants because they're Catholic, and so they're anti-abortion, and they'll be right-wingers if we just educate them. I mean, they actually made that as a serious sales pitch a few years ago, and the Republican Party just wouldn't buy it, which tells me that it's all about race. Beverly, thank you for the call. Rich in Cedro-Willie, Washington. Hey, Rich, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
Hey, I want to give an answer to my neighbor up the road in Bellingham there, Chris, the union guy.
Yeah.
Saying we shouldn't call these temporary jobs. But the reason we have to call them temporary jobs is because the Trumpsters of this world are out there saying, oh, by greenlighting these projects, we're instantly going to create 250,000 permanent jobs all across the country. Everything's going to be sunshine and daylight. When that is just not the case. It's maybe 2,000 rolling positions in a project like this. And, now Chris may be able to move with the project, or his company or union will get him the next job. But what about like the housekeeper at the hotel, the temporary hired waitress, or the temporary hired clerk at the convenience store? Once the project moves on, they go back to being unemployed.
The real answer to Chris, and it's one that Troy, my associate producer here, said, and actually Chris and Troy, both of you were saying this at the same time during the break, was like, if Chris, the caller, is really concerned about having more construction jobs, then start lobbying the Republican administration for an actual infrastructure project rather than just pipelines. Pipelines don't serve us, but let's build high-speed rail. Let's bring broadband to everybody in the country, like they've done in South Korea, like they've done in Japan, like they've done all over Europe. Let's upgrade our roads. Let's build out an electric infrastructure so that electric cars can function on our roads and things like that, more easily. Put electric charging stations in all the rest stops and things all along the interstate highway. I mean, there's so many things that could be done that would actually benefit all of us, that would create enormous numbers of jobs for people like Chris. But I have a feeling Chris actually, might even have just been basically your paid troll, or maybe even an employee of Energy Transfer Partners. Who knows? Because that's the kind of sales pitch that you get from professional propagandists. Rich, thanks a lot for the call. I appreciate it. Thank you all for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow. It'll be Anything Goes Friday. In the meantime, please get out there, get active, and be sure to, defund DAPL, defunddapl.org. Check it out. Get active, because democracy is not going to work unless we show up. Tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.